Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today's guest is artist Jonathan Nagel.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today, we are going to talk about soul art. I have a very special guest for you, Jonathan Nagel. Jonathan came to my 2023 mandala workshop. Well, he was there online.
There's so much going on.
But he blew us all completely away with his art. We only had one day to paint.
Wow.
Jesus, that's freaking incredible. You guys see that? And so the second day is all about sharing, and then Angie and I do interpretations of everybody's art to add insight to what messages they've left for themselves for their year.
I want you to know that your art is extremely beautiful. Don't get me wrong. So what I'm looking for is, what do I need to tell you so that you can actually live that dream without creating more problems than dream?
Jonathan's art was incredibly powerful and is the basis for our podcast today. And Jonathan's art is loaded with archetypal themes that will touch all of us in our day-to-day lives. And you'll be able to see the art. It'll be available in the show notes. It's going to be very helpful to look at the art as we go through the podcast today. And Jonathan's background is in storytelling, creating from soul, and our title today is Soul Art. He's a film producer, an illustrator in the field of design, and these are all excellent resources within Jonathan we'll draw from today. And we're going to journey into what the soul is, why creativity is so important to our overall health, well-being, and spiritual development, the key archetypes that emerged in Jonathan's 2023 mandala, and how Jonathan's mandala art carries messages for us all, which is why we're doing a podcast on it. I also feel that after analyzing Jonathan's art, that Jonathan is one of the rare people that is serving as a vessel to channel new myths. New myths are traditionally channeled and embodied first by shaman, poets, artists, and musicians. Today, Jonathan and I are going to share a dialogue on these important concepts and how they can enhance our life and how they relate to all of us. Not just Jonathan. That's what's unique about his art. Even though it was his 2023 mandala, as soon as I began analyzing it, I saw all sorts of archetypal images. And because it's his 2023 art, there's a lot of messages in there, I think, that are really relevant to all of us in 2023. And you're probably going to find as you listen that many of the things that are in there are already very alive on the world stage. And you can see the art, like I said in the show notes. Jonathan titled this piece of art, Lightbringer, Birth of Consciousness. And he is making that art available to any of you that would like to buy it. He's going to produce high-quality prints that will be available to you for $275. And all the listeners get a 10% discount. If you want a copy of the art because you look at it and say, wow, that's cool, which you're probably going to do. That's what I did. For everybody in the classroom just went, holy shit, how did he do that? And so these prints come to you, they're not framed. You'd have to frame it yourself, but it is a very high quality print. And to get that art, just so I make sure that it's mentioned before we get into the podcast, or you don't, should you dare not make it through the whole podcast, my God, that would be a sin. You'd burn in hell for that. But if you do want it, it's at Jonathan's website, which is JonathanNagelDesign.com. Jonathan, Nagel, design.com/products. And when you're there, look for the print titled Lightbringer, Birth of Consciousness. To get your 10% discount, you're going to need to use the code all caps Chek, CHEK 10, and that'll get you a 10% discount. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. I'm thrilled to be here.
Right on. It was nice to be able to bring you out to the Rainbow House and show you how we live in California, since you're a New Mexico man. So what a amazing journey we've had since you shared this art in the workshop. We did quite a lot of discussion on it in class, as you would remember, because it was such a comprehensive piece of art. My allotted 10 minutes for everybody turned out to be over an hour for you. But the reason I did that was because you were actually channeling messages that were so appropriate to everybody in the group that I felt it was actually important for the group to see what was in your art. Jonathan, not only do I find you to be an interesting person, but I think your story is a fantastic story for anyone that's trying to find both connection to their soul and their path in life, and particularly their vocation. I feel our vocation is an essential way we both grow and grow ourselves spiritually. So that's important. It's also a way we give love and inspiration to others to do the same. I mean, obviously you're an illustrator, right? So here's your vocation, creating spiritual evolution, opening you up, opening me up, opening everybody up. And that's your love right there. And I feel that now more than ever, at least in the span of my lifetime, people need support to find their center, their heart, and express themselves in a way that allow them to both make a living and have a labor of love, which is really the only labor that's sustainable. So to begin our journey today, Jonathan, could you share an overview of your life, the challenges you've worked through, and how they've ultimately led you to being such a skilled artist, filmmaker, storyteller, designer, and all the other things that you do?
Absolutely, be happy to. And again, thank you so much for having me out to the Rainbow House, and seeing the whole Paul Chek experience is its own journey on its own. A lot of my life has sort of been steeped in art in various ways. Grew up painting and drawing at an early age. I think as any kid did, just scribbling, stuff at school. I did a lot of copying of cartoons and other things. My parents also enrolled me in art classes. One of my earliest. It was a gentleman named Jack Ostrom who taught me a lot of my very first sight-sized drawings, looking at, and out of all things, I think you'd appreciate this. It was World War II military aircraft, and so I would take, let's say, a P-51 Mustang from an early war photograph, and I would actually translate that into a drawing. And this sort of taught me a lot of skills early on that would then later reconnect as I took the path as an artist more seriously. I also did things, performance-wise. I did makeup effects in theater, and I also, played the violin. So a lot of very artistic endeavors in my life were sort of something that my parents valued a lot in our upbringing, my brother, my sister, and I. There's also a lot of, I think with art as a vocation, it's also a lot of challenges involved with that.
Yes.
And I would, I'd be bullshitting people if I said it wasn't, it wasn't a walk in a park, because there's all of the, there's no way to make the messages of no way to make a living. There's no way to, that message was so strong that I sort of went down the path of the, I don't know if I would say the ego, but just sort of saying, okay, I'll do this and I'll do it on my, my free time on the side, but I won't do it full time. And so that message early on sort of, I remember feeling that and being like, that was probably I'm going to say the wrong decision, but it was the right decision at the time that then led to a lot of what I'm channeling and experiencing now as an artist. So I went to school for media and design related ideas, and the challenges I kept kind of facing were it's I really love what I'm doing. I ended up working in high tech and software for some of the top software companies the last 20 years, and everything from user interface design to artificial intelligence to video games and video game engine technology, and so for some of the best software companies, like I said, in the world. And underlying all that, though, the entire time, I was like, I'm still not totally set on what I'm doing. I don't particularly love it, but I'm great at it. So I kept listening to myself on the weekends. I'd be doing figure drawing. I would be doing life drawing just from life and observational drawing. And that then led to sort of a moment of crisis around 26 when I decided that, okay, I can go down this path, or I can take a giant leap and go down this path. And I decided to, that was the biggest, let's say that's the first challenge that I had to overcome was, what does my heart really want? And so I decided to build a really comprehensive plan on how to do that, which was to, I was living at that time in Denver, and I decided to make that plan of going after my dreams, which was being a visual artist and making a living out of that. So I ended up leaving Denver to pursue my path in design. I decided to go to the top design school in the world in Pasadena. And that was something I had a lot of, family and friends like, well, why don't you just go to like the local art school or whatever? And I was like, well, if I'm going to make this decision, I want to go to the top design. It's either the best or it's not. And so the everything from like my favorite artists in film, in design, it sort of was this like all roads led to Art Center. So some of the best filmmakers and product designers and transportation designers all seem to have gone to this school. And I said, well, they're doing something right. And it was not easy to get into the school. They basically deny everybody who tries to go. And so it took me, that was a humbling experience. It took me what I thought, I gave myself about 3 attempts to get into the school. And eventually on the 3rd attempt, I was like, okay, maybe this isn't the right path. And so I had to actually spend an extra almost year and a half, like developing my skills even more to show this school that this is really what I, want to be doing. And so they, eventually it was, my portfolio was good enough to get into that school. And then I spent another 4 years in college going through that process in this curriculum. And I specialized in illustration. They saw something in my portfolio, which I actually really appreciate. It was like illustration and also like an emphasis on entertainment design. So storytelling and a lot of creativity. And the program there was extremely rigorous. It was something that it was, I think I might've mentioned this before, but it's traumatizing, but in a very good way. The program really, I'd say, put myself through multiple dark nights of the soul.
What was the kind of pressures that did that to you? Is it just the amount that you have to produce, or is it the technical accuracy of it?
All of that. There is the, they say basically, okay, you have, let's say 5 classes, and you have like every instructor is essentially saying you have to meet my expectations. And so you have 5, classes at a time that are heavy workloads. And so it's like you're working around the clock with time management, with, and it's not just time management, it's like nutrition, it's everything. And having the structure to make it through that was a lot. There's actually moments where I had to actually take a leave of absence because it's so tremendously straining. And where I think that school is well positioned is a good friend of mine actually said this the best. I think it's better how he said it. It was like, it's like going to the top school in the world. Let's say like a Harvard or an Oxford or an MIT, but there's no right answer. You're going into a classroom and you're essentially using nothing to create something, and also at a really high level of accuracy, so that it's communicating ideas and also just it's very clear to the viewer who's receiving those drawings, paintings, models, whatever it is that we're creating. So yeah, it was extremely difficult to get through that school, and I'd say that most students don't. There are those who are really gifted that also go through that school, and I'd say they're after maybe 3 terms, maybe 4 terms, they're already getting picked up by major companies because their creativity is at such a high level. And yeah, so it was quite an experience to go through that school. And I mean, I didn't even know about Art Center. I heard about it from my neighbor when I was growing up, who worked for Mattel in the Hot Wheels division. And I remember going over to his house as a kid, and it was a house that he designed himself.
Yeah.
And he had this art studio. And I remember going in his art studio and seeing these beautiful renderings of like, these made up cars that they're making for Hot Wheels and at Mattel. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. How do you do this? And he talked about Art Center a little bit, but I didn't really put two and two together at the time. And then it was around 2000, maybe like 2001 or so, I took a trip to San Rafael, California, and I had the unbelievable opportunities. It was like right around when film was moving from analog to digital. And George Lucas was like pushing all of this. He had the first, I think it was either the first or the second Visual Effects Society conference.
Mm-hmm.
And during that conference, I met the sort of the literally the grandfathers of visual effects, all the way to the current, guard of visual effects from all these major film companies. And it was there that I met, for example, like Ray Harryhausen, who's, probably one of my biggest inspirations in film, where he did all the stop motion animation for like Jason and the Argonauts and a lot of these old stop motion animation films. And then it was like his ability to sort of like inspire a whole legion of generations, like George Lucas and all these other Hollywood filmmakers. And in that, I also met another big inspiration of mine who graduated with my neighbor, who is Sid Mead. And now Sid Mead, for those in the world of design, it's like he's beyond a visionary. He designed the movie, like, and when I say design, like he visually designed the whole film of like Tron, of the film Blade Runner. So, it was Ridley Scott at the time who said, I'm looking for a really good designer. And they looked no further than Sid Mead to basically design the entire look, plus all of like the transportation, everything that's going on in that world. And so he was an enormous inspiration of mine. Also went to Art Center. And so when I say like some of the most heavy hitter of designers have all gone to school there, and that's where sort of like everything started leading back to that. But it was Sid Mead who actually was the one who inspired me. And it's like, yeah, if you really are serious about this, you should pursue design and, look at, possibly Cal Arts, but where I went to school at Art Center. And I didn't really think too much about it at age, 20, 21. And then it sort of came back, sort of how life is. It's like those really important moments come back in later on, and we make sense of it and go, I see what that moment was telling me.
Yeah, that's good. Well, that's soul guidance, and that's what we're about to get into. Your 2023 mandala is, as I mentioned, incredibly complex. Angie, myself, and those that were in class were amazed at the complexity that you could produce in one day. I mean, when we came back to start the next day and you showed the art, I'm like, how on earth did he do that in one day? I mean, we were looking at my 2023 mandala, which is based on the archetype of the chariot. And I told you it took me about probably around 45, 50 hours to do. And you did that in, whatever time we had one day. I know you worked on it through the evening, so still it's within one day. But I look at it, I'm still looking at this going, how in the freaking hell? I mean, the detail in there, and then it's really like about 10 pieces of art merged into one. But I'd love to know, how did you establish connection with your soul or source to begin your mandala process, and what was moving through you as you painted it? What were you experiencing? So how did you initiate the process, right? We all sat down, a lot of people, you probably saw the paperwork I sent out to everybody saying, this is how you prepare. And a lot of people will not even do that. Of course, they'll just show up in class blank, right, and just stare at their canvas. And I've done a lot of these mandala. I've been running mandala workshops for, probably for, I would imagine, since 2006, maybe 7 or something like that. And so people can sit down, and people will actually sometimes break down and start crying and all sorts of stuff. They can't get anything to come out of them. And then other people follow the procedure I gave. But then there's people like you that have their own
way. I'm just curious, how did you make connection with, well, first of all, what aspect of you painted? I mean, was it your mind? Was it how would you describe it? I mean, how did that come through you is the question.
Yeah. So I think the process is really important to describe. So I would say I definitely read the document you sent out. I think that's a really important document that helped me understand different ways to approach it as well. But I started setting my intentions whenever I do something that I feel is like a big thing. I'll start weeks ahead of time, if not like a month, and really start to get clear on what is it that I'm actually approaching and what am I trying to get out of it. Like start to really set those intentions very clearly. So I would say every morning, maybe 3 weeks previously to the mandala workshop, I actually would meditate, between 10 and 30 minutes a day.
Good.
And those meditations started to kind of begin to align things.
Right.
And I was asking my soul really specific questions so that those ideas started to, come into like a confluence of ideas.
Right.
And then eventually I'd say I was sort of hoping that there was going to be more of a surge of ideas that came maybe like a week previously. And it was maybe the day before I was sitting there. And after each of these meditations, I would just pull out my sketchbook and write down notes that kind of came through for me. But it was the day before where it was like the cork just blew off, and I was like, I know exactly what it is that I'm actually going to start to work on. And so I just sat there and just almost just, for lack of a better term, like vomited everything that was coming through in sketches, whether it be writing, drawings, scribbles, whatever came through. And then once all that came through, that's where like my mind and my soul starts to like look at it and then starts to synthesize through it and say, okay, I can say this in a better way this way, or I can draw this in a better way this way. And so then I start to, take that, all those different pieces and start to align them into that puzzle that, comes out as the actual artwork itself.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, I'm glad to hear. Well, I'm glad that you thought my document was good enough to use. I mean, with your skills, you might have looked at it and went, "No, this guy's crazy. Man. I got a way better way to do it than that." What was moving through you as you were painting? I mean,
Yeah.
what did it describe that experience?
A lot of that comes down to is that I give myself, whenever I'm making art, I'm giving myself a constraint, giving myself like time, and giving myself space. And then once I have those, creativity just like naturally comes through. And whether it be like a couple hours or a whole day or a weekend or even longer, but as long as I give myself that space and then that time, everything starts to come through. So things that were coming through, it's almost like if you've ever seen the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, it's sort of that last moment in the film where they journey through the infinite, and it's just like shapes are coming through and colors are coming through. So for me, that's what starts to come through, but it's not just shapes and colors. Essentially, at one point I'm like, okay, and I start asking myself really deep questions on like, if a color comes through, I start to ask like, well, if blue is coming through, why is blue coming through? So I start to slow down the process inside of the process to be able to really, it really comes down to is really slowing down. So it becomes a visual meditation rather than just a, breathing meditation with my eyes closed. It's as if like, I'm there, but there is another force moving through me that's actually, creating the artwork, and that I'm also in dialogue with as it's happening.
That's what I call soul.
Okay. Yeah.
That's we have more on this coming up, so I won't get into it too much now, but, I think it's Henry Miller. Is it Henry Miller? The guy that wrote The Art Spirit.
Yes, I know the book.
Yeah, so he calls that the art spirit, And so that's my favorite part of painting is when the art spirit starts, you know that you're being painted.
Yes.
You're not painting, you're being painted through, and I call that being painted. And that for me is when I'm the highest, it's like, okay, I've got the art spirit here. And
Totally.
And I just let go to it. And it's like, sometimes I'm talking to the art spirit, go, are you sure you want to do that? That might screw this whole thing up, And I'm like, well, the art spirit says yes, so here we go. And sometimes I look at what I paint and go, I don't even know how I did that. I really couldn't. If you asked me to paint that, I couldn't do it.
Mm.
And that's when you know the art spirit's there.
Yeah, it's an incredible experience to just feel that spirit moving through,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like it knows before
You know.
you know. Yeah, it's like that idea of like getting out of our own way, and it works.
Yeah, the other thing too that I experience is I'm sure you've experienced it, when that art spirit's moving through you, if all of a sudden your ego starts wanting to change something, you can feel, there's a feeling like, it's almost like you're about to cheat on your wife or something. It's like you're not holding hands with your dance partner, and you're stepping on toes here.
Yeah.
And like I find that happens, like the ego, my ego, tends to want to over decorate things, or put too many things in. And so one of the things the art spirit has taught me is that less can be much more, and so that's been a real transition in my own art, is just knowing when to not keep going, right? Because sometimes you can end up being like a kid that doesn't know when to stop adding, right?
Yeah. That's a big problem. I think that's something that I've learned. It goes back to like when I was talking about Art Center, is that when going through school, that was a big problem. Was it's like, I'm like, oh, well, if I can just make this, I'll just make it. But that doesn't necessarily lead to better results. So the editing process and being able to edit in real time. So it's like the spirit is coming through, and then challenging these things as they come through, and just being like, does this really need, like, does this mark need to be put down?
Mm-hmm.
Does this, idea need to be expressed? And if it doesn't, it's just almost an instant moment where you say, like, you just eliminate it and just be like, no, that doesn't need to be there. It's just, and so that it focuses everything to the ultimate idea. And it is interesting because I can feel it. It feels like a clear channel. Like it's just like you go through like a, I don't know, pipe, like you're just going through it. And then when it starts to get too like constrictive, just take a breath, and then it opens.
Mm-hmm.
And more ideas start to come through. And that to me is like, I don't think it's the same, but when I see, and hear about surfers riding a wave, I'm like, that seems like one of the coolest things to experience. I feel like this is sort of that, but from the inside out.
Yes. This discussion we're having about, knowing when not to add or what to add, one of the ways I like to think of God is that God is an artist, and God, it's just all pure creativity. It's not like God's sitting around going, well, I really fucked that up. It's really more like Jackson Pollock going at it with a paintbrush, and it looks like he's just having a seizure while he's painting, and so the point I'm making is, isn't it interesting that if you look at your life, all of us, as though it is art, wouldn't we all gain a lot from that very same process, right? How many relationships turn out to be problematic, and we should just not keep adding them to the art? Or how many times maybe is there an opportunity that we talk ourselves out of, maybe because we're insecure about something, or we convince ourselves that we don't have time, but look at it in hindsight and go, wow, I really wish I would have done that. Like, for example, if you listened to someone else and didn't go to the school you went to, you may have regretted it one day and realized that you were being guided there for a reason, right? And like you said, that previous meeting with the designer came back to you years later, and it all clicked into place. Don't you think if we looked at our life as art and listened to the art spirit, which would be our soul, that we might make more beauty instead of, over painting the world?
Absolutely. I think it's a great point, and something that a lot of us need to sort of call in. It's like just, thinking of it as not just art, but actually, nutrition, movement, all of these are like our paintbrush, like our paint strokes on our life.
Yeah, or colors in the palette.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, every one of them is an expression of the art of living,
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're not paying attention to your diet, that's like an artist who's not paying attention to what brush they're using. And if you're using a fat brush when you need a thin one, you're going to make a mess. So I think the point is that if we really start looking at our life as the art of love and the art of relationship and the art of participation, and then say, okay, where am I over or under loving? Where am I not participating adequately or burning myself out because I don't know how to stop when I should be stopping, and engage the art of rest or the art of creative freedom, so you're not stressing yourself so much. I think there's just a myriad of ways. And the other thing too is, this is a bit deeper of a concept, but I've meditated on this deeply, and Alex Gray's art is what put me into these meditations quite often, is that God is not only the ultimate artist, but God can walk away from the painting and have no attachment to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think there's a lot of lesson in that. And, you know, I don't think Source is really criticizing the painting, no matter how bad we fuck up the world as humans. God's looking at it and going, look, isn't that amazing? Just watch it go and see where it leads. And, you know, if the whole thing gets fucked up, we just pull out a new canvas and start somewhere else. I mean, not that I'm encouraging us to fuck it up and start somewhere else, because I think we've probably done that too many times already. But I think that there's I think from a spiritual perspective, this is where detachment, healthy detachment, comes in, because, you know, one of the things that disables artists is their own self-criticism.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think sometimes being self-critical, there's a point at which being self-critical can enhance your performance, your discipline, your accuracy, but there's a tipping point where it becomes extremely disabling, and the next thing you know, you get anxiety attacks, and someone's giving you a diagnosis, you're taking pills, and now you kind of lose track of who you are because you fell too deep into your own self-judgment. So it's really an amazing proposition to look at life literally as divine art. But then it's even more amazing when you realize that Great Spirit is handing you the paintbrush every day and saying, Jonathan, help me.
Mm-hmm.
Bring something beautiful into the world. And that's the same thing that's being said to all of us. Bring something beautiful into the world. Our children are our art, right?
Yeah.
You're the product of your parents' art. And look how beautifully they set you up for you to express your soul in a way that was nourishing to your soul. So there you see the art of parenting, and then we have the art of our vocation. We have the art of our gardens, or the way we decorate our home, or how we take care of our bodies, or how we fill or not fill our minds, and what we put in our head. I mean, really, if you think of a mind as a canvas, a lot of people just put a pile of shit in there and don't even edit the art. Hi, everybody. Today I have a very special, practical, free offering for you. I suspect you know that low back injuries are the most common of all orthopedic injuries, regardless of age, profession, or what sport people play. And a huge percentage of low back injuries happen while squatting. Squatting is one of the 7 primal pattern movements I identified as essential to our ability to function well in our home, work, recreational, fitness, or sports environments. Most don't realize it, but the squat pattern is one of the most common patterns that lead to low back injuries. We are using the squat pattern when we get in and out of chairs, on and off the toilet, or engage small children. Additionally, to get in and out of a car requires a single-legged squat with a bend and a twist, particularly if you drive a car that's low to the ground, like a sports car, which is a very complex movement for anybody with a weak dysfunctional core or who has an unresolved back injury from the past, which is exceedingly common, even among world-class athletes. I would love to give you the squat assessment I developed for the students of the Chek Academy so you can identify any muscle imbalances, joint restrictions, or technical flaws that include the need for form correction or corrective stretching, joint mobilization, and specific strengthening.
Anybody that wants to heal from back pain, avoid unwanted back pain, enhance work readiness and athletic performance will be well supported by using my free squat assessment checklist. My squat assessment is ideal for any athlete wanting to optimize their performance in the squat. My squat assessment includes 3 key setup assessments, 11 squat execution assessments, a list of key indicators of muscle imbalances, muscle weakness, or joint restrictions. Additionally, once you've downloaded my squat assessment, you will receive a sequence of follow-up videos that will show you how to use it. These instructional videos are not only highly informative, they are also free. To get your squat assessment form and free instructional videos on how to use it to its potential, go to chekinstitute.com/squat-assessment. That's chekinstitute.com/squat-assessment. I'm sure you'll be amazed at how effective this squat assessment is, even if you don't have back pain, and how much it can help you help others. Enjoy. If there's an overarching message in your 2023 mandala for yourself, what is it, and why is having your mandala near you or in your space where you live important to you?
The overarching message, I think, for me and how I am relating to the mandala is this idea that we have like infinite potential as human beings, and that idea, like we're, naming the painting Lightbringer, Birth of Consciousness, it's that idea where we have at like that, in the middle of this mandala is a fetus, and
Yes.
the idea that from there, it's sort of like the birth of a, whether it be this universe or multiple universes or new dimensions, like we can constantly be creating new things, whether it be every day, but I almost look at like every moment. Like if I move my arm, I'm moving it, and that's like an act of creation. So
Yes.
everything is constantly being created in every single moment.
Yes. And
So-
everything's creating everything else.
Right.
You've commented on how you like the view from the back of the house.
Mhm.
Well, a view like that adds a whole lot to your inner world versus looking at high-rise apartment buildings
hmm
and concrete and glass in a city somewhere. So, we can't really separate ourselves from the environment is what I'm saying. So the art outside of us is influencing the art in us, and what we do from the inside out affects everything outside of us. So there's just this reciprocal feedback loop going on all the time.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's it's a really important thing. That's why it's like imbuing the intention as we're, when I'm creating this, it's really focusing on what is it that I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So then I'm creating that feel. Like if I really wanted to create anger and destruction, I can go and create that.
Yeah.
But if I want to create love, joy, harmony, peace, vitality, I can create that too. It's just being conscious of it, so that then I'm able to, instill that and have that intention in the artwork that I create.
And isn't that just a metaphor for life right there?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, if people would just slow down a little bit and say, okay, today is a new day, it's a new piece of art, and I choose to have a day of harmony and positive relationships. And so then if someone starts, being a pain in the ass, you can write there and say, this isn't part of my art today, so I'm going to leave this person to outgas however they want, wherever they want, but I don't need to be part of it. And when people don't have the discipline to realize what is and isn't part of the art of their day, then they often end up getting entangled in all sorts of stuff that just ruins the canvas for the day and maybe for the rest of their life in some situations.
Yeah. I mean, I've gone through those moments. I think like everybody gone through trauma, has gone through those, trials and tribulations in life. And it's when we can look at those and have, a lot of love and self-compassion for ourselves, we can then learn to, know that pain and that suffering is there, but then be able to alchemically transmute that into beauty, love, art, and our whole life.
Yeah, I think it's an important concept for all of us to keep conscious of it. I know for me, once I started drawing, using watercolor pencils, watercolors, acrylic paint, and outpouring more. It was easier for me to see how what was happening in my art was a mirror of how I was managing my life. So if I was too busy in my head because of a lot of work pressure, I found that it took several pieces of art to finally get that busyness out. I had to paint it out of myself, really.
Yeah.
So I found that art could be a real healing form of meditation that was like a living mirror. It was showing me back to me.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting too, is that this is something I think as a designer, trained in this, it's also that we can truly, it comes through and it can be expressed, but you can also intentionally design it into art, like to actually say, like, I want this line to feel harmonious. How do I make a line feel harmonious versus, be in discord? So it's looking at these and actually then expressing that and being conscious of that. That's why it's slowing down everything to that spirit and just having it help us guide us through what we're going through.
One of the things I found through my artwork is that I had to be really conscious of my breathing. Just like when I was a soldier, we have these high-speed pop-up target ranges where we go for testing. And you often have like 1 second a target can pop up out of the woods 300, 400 meters away. And you might have 1 second to shoot that thing down. And so you really have to learn to breathe as you're squeezing the trigger. You got to exhale with it, or some like to exhale till they're at the end of the exhale and squeeze on the pause between the exhale and the inhale. But you learn when you're doing competitive shooting that you have to really work with your breath. And I found that if I'm trying to make a line straight or a circle and not make it wiggle, or get a line that doesn't go fuzzy, or to even get the paint to draw without globbing or behaving weird, that I really need to time my movement with my breath. And I bring that up because, breath work is such a big craze right now, but I think people don't realize that something like art brings you into the practice of breath work, but gives you an immediate feedback loop to show you why breath work is so important. Because if you try to do it without it, your art won't be as good. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in that regard.
Yeah. So what comes up for me in that is I had one of my very first, I think it was a night class. It was Richard Petruska, and it was a VisCom class. Now in VisCom, it's basically how do you visually communicate. And he had us take a China marker, which, are sort of like crayons, and a giant biggie newsprint pad. And I didn't think about it at the time. And then it took maybe about a couple months, and then eventually it's like years where I'm like, I see what the lesson was he was trying to teach us. And it's like with the China marker, it has the ability to, it makes a bold mark. And then, but you have the ability to also feel the marks that you're making as you it's almost like carving in a way. So it's like you're putting pressure into it and letting pressure go. And those marks that we learned, one of the ones was just basically doing an infinity sign. And
one of my favorite signs in the whole world.
Yeah, it's an incredible, because it's that over looping and going back into itself. And one of the things I learned in his class was he's also a transportation designer. That's what he teaches a lot of students who go on to create, every car imaginable for Ferrari and for Honda, everything in between. And it's that the whole the whole side view of a car,
right?
And it's like, how do you connect the lines? And it's a meditation.
Yes.
And it's being in tune with that, and we learn to really just harmonize with our breath and our body. And if something intense comes up, it's like, okay, that might need intensity in that mark, but then it can be released.
Yes.
And so it's an absolute dance in the process to slow down and also to have fun with that too. And that we can be more in tune with what's going through our body, and truly, like, it's getting out of our head. It's literally being in our body, embodied in the artwork, and then feeling it as it's coming through.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just brought it up because there is so much emphasis on breath work, but I think what happens is a lot of people go to breathwork workshops and they huff and they puff and they get high as a kite. And then they go off and do their ordinary life and they don't think about their breath. And I've seen this over and over again. And, I have a 2-day workshop I developed many years ago called The Science of Breathing and Movement. And I show how critical breathing is while you're lifting weights or doing athletic anything, and how the entire respiratory system governs the musculoskeletal system. And if you know how the breathing cycle drives the motor system, then you know which movements to be exhaling with, which movements to be inhaling with, how to charge your core and hold the breath so that you have stability, how to use a partial release of the breath. For example, if you're jumping down off of a box doing plyometrics, I teach this to motocross racers because they do a lot of heavy landings, right?
Right.
And so I show how to, as when you're in the air, you fill your lungs, you activate your core, and when you hit the ground, you just leave your lips just tight enough that it acts like a release valve, so it acts like an air suspension system. And so it actually protects the spine from too much shock. And so a lot of motocross racers, when I would teach them this, said, wow, that's an amazingly helpful tool, because oftentimes I land so hard it just shocks the hell out of my spine. But when I use this technique, I can buffer it. And so my point is that we should all find ways to bring our breathing awareness into our work. And one of the simplest things to do is just do a little sketch each day. I many times with my patients, I have them, especially if they're dealing with depression or anxiety or those types of things, I say start your day with a simple mandala. So I'll have them go out and buy like a little 8x10 art pad. I keep it real simple, just colored pencils or watercolor pens. Draw a circle and just put whatever in it that you choose to experience as your day. So if you want to have a happy sunny day, draw maybe a smiling sun, right? But point being is there's a chance to practice your breath work in importing the breath from just breathing into the act of deliberate motion and deliberate creativity. And I think that those types of activities, because the breath is so linked to our consciousness, that it shows us how to integrate our consciousness, our breathing, and our body and our action, and bring those all together as one flow, where in most people, they're all disjointed.
Yeah. It's really, I love that idea of just like every day doing an act of art.
Yes.
And it doesn't, I think a lot of times it's the ego, it's the critical, faculty in our mind that's like, well, I can't do art, or I can't draw, or I've actually, there's so many people that say that, like, I can't draw. And I'm like, can you grab a pencil and just like, I just, there's a part of me that eventually was just like, I think this is bullshit. I think that people can literally take a, pencil, and as long as they can make a mark, that's drawing.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be Michelangelo's, level of the Sistine Chapel, but they can make a mark. And that to me is an act of art on its own.
Well, you've seen my mother's sculptures, and
yeah,
she's a very accomplished sculptor. And most every time she sees my art, she looks at it and she says, you really need to take an art class, because your proportions are off, and this eye's different than that eye. And, I get a long list of, why it's wrong, which irritates me. And so I have to breathe and let my mother be my mother. But and the reason I'm sharing this is because a lot of the most common excuse I get from patients and students in my classes where art's involved is, I'm not an artist. And so I say, guess what? Neither am I. But I'm an expressionist. When I paint to express myself. I don't want to be constrained. You see, if I had the kind of training that you did, I would probably be constantly evaluating everything I'm doing. Just because I have such an analytical mind, it would just turn into a paralytical situation. So I've purposely avoided taking lessons because I want my art to be
I want the little boy in me to have the freedom to be alive instead of having always such heavy adult responsibilities and hearing this judging voice in my head or Freud's superego, you should have done, oh, that's not good enough. So what I try to do with people is say, don't think about it as art. Think about it as expressing yourself. And it's just for you. Who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't give a shit. That's what I told my mom. I don't give a fuck if my eyes aren't balanced. The point, Mom, is I had a fucking good time doing that.
Yep.
And if I was like you, then everything would be technical. I mean, to do a beard like that out of clay, I mean, that's got to be a lot of tricky work, right?
Uh-huh.
And for me, I would just, he might look Rastafarian if I did him, but I'd say, look at Father Gregory Boyle, look how cool your beard is.
Yeah.
I think it's a very helpful transition for all of us in many areas of our life to go from the critical judging mind into authentic acts of creative expression. I mean, a good example is I've had many young men in my classes telling me that they're reading books about sex because they want to be better at sex. And I say, it's probably just going to fuck your sex life up. How about if you just pay attention to the woman you're with, because no two of them are ever going to be the same. So if you think what gave the last girl an orgasm is going to work next time, you're probably making a dangerous mistake because now you're getting into technique, not connection.
Yeah.
So the point I'm making is be present with the person, engage in the relationship, and let the spirit of the relationship create the art we call sex. But sitting there technically analyzing where her G-spot is or all this, that just turns it into an intellectual blockade, really.
Yeah, presence is super important. It's just being able to be present with, I mean, it could be, like I said, you could just be making love to the art. It's just like, there's a feeling when and they're not necessarily great. They're just literally abstract pieces of art that just, I'm looking at it and going like, I just loved how the actual brush felt going across the canvas.
Yes.
And I'm
I
like,
do too.
It's like, you can't replicate that experience because your body is so present with the feeling and you just feel it going across the canvas. And it's like the whole body is just resonant with it. It feels so good.
That brings up a thought to me too that I didn't have planned on talking about, but I think it's really important. I'm very sensitive to subtle energies because I do a lot of healing work and spiritual practice and things like that. But one of the things that I find fascinating about painting is that every single color and every stroke changes the vibration of the art.
Mm-hmm.
And it affects me on the inside. And so, like, I might take a black canvas and just put a yellow line on it and just pay attention to what does that do inside of me.
Yeah, that's great.
And then what happens when I add blue to it? And then I notice what that's doing to my energy. And over the years, I've been practicing this technique, which I think it'd be fun for you to try. I'd love to see what happens when you do it. So what I do is I get a sense of my center, like wherever you feel your center is. Typically for me, when I'm feeling energy, it's if you drew a circle from your pubic bone to your heart, like that, like a target. So right here. And if I said, okay, right in the middle is the bullseye, then as I'm painting whatever it is that I'm painting, if I feel that energy is departing from the center, I know that whoever looks at the art is going to be pulled out of their center. And so when Angie was going through her biogeometry training, which measures BG3, which is a very powerful healing energy, it's what's put off by all the major healing sites in the world, she started analyzing my paintings, and she found that they were all producing huge amounts of BG3. And because I'm friends with Ibrahim Karim and his daughter Doria Karim, who are the best in the world at biogeometry, when I would paint my mandalas for the year, I would say to Doria, would you check this for BG3? And she would say, Paul, this is emitting huge amounts of BG3. One year, she said, all you need to do is just put a little bit of white, the one that you liked with Cernunnos on it?
Yes.
She said, just make the hoof on one of his feet just a little thicker, just a slight bit thicker, and it'll bring it right into perfect BG3. And so I found over the years, without knowing what I was doing through this practice, that I was actually producing artwork that was harmonized to the BG3 frequency, which I called it my centering frequency. But Angie was able to measure it and show that what would happen with anyone looking at the art or even being in the room where it was present was it would bring them into the BG3 healing frequency.
Amazing.
So I would be curious to see what happens if you take that concept and just see, as you're painting, what do you have to do to keep whatever's being created centering in you?
I love that. I'd definitely like to try that. That sounds cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it really teaches you some amazing things. Like the slightest addition of the wrong color or the wrong shape takes you out of your center.
Yeah.
So if it's that powerful and it can be felt, and Angie can measure it objectively with instruments, doesn't that mean that the same thing is true about how we talk to people or how we organize our home or our furniture or how we manage our schedule? Because those things are all on the canvas of our life.
Right.
And so if we learn to orient ourselves toward the center, one of my favorite quotes, and I have it written down on my computer to remind me every day, and I have a blog out on it right now called Living a Centered Life. The quote is by Houston Smith. He says, "To the man who lives his life from his center, all tensions disappear."
Great quote.
And isn't that just the truth, right?
Yeah.
And that's really what Zen's about.
Yeah.
That's what the inner arts are about. That's what advanced martial arts is about, is learning to stay in your center and not get thrown off emotionally, mentally, or physically.
Mm-hmm.
So as I've grown through my various stages of my own evolution, I found that I can learn from my art things that ultimately make me aware of what I'm doing as I'm painting my life.
Yeah. I would say that. That's a great quote. It's something that just, when we can feel so in harmony with life, it's so, everything just starts to come together.
It does. It's like a river that knows its destination without conscious thought.
Yeah.
It just knows where it's heading for the ocean.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to decide, am I off coordinates? Could someone pass me an iPhone so I can see if I'm going in the right direction?
Right.
The river just knows. It flows from its center. Hi, everybody. I imagine some of you are finding that your mind is not as sharp as it was, or that you can't seem to remember things as well, such as the last page you read in a book, or the key points from a meeting you just attended recently. Do you feel that your brain is taking longer to come online, or that your thinking gets muddled or fuzzy when you've got a lot to get done? If so, Organifi Pure may be just the magic you need. A key ingredient in Organifi Pure, called neurofactor, showed a significant impact on brain-derived neurotropic factor, which has been widely reported to play a critical role in neuronal development, maintenance, repair, and protection against neurodegeneration. The certified organic combination of herbs and Organifi Pure not only enhances mental clarity and promotes brain-derived neurotropic factor to stimulate the development of new neural pathways, it aids in enhanced digestion, which is important because many cognitive problems are symptoms of poor digestion. To get your Organifi Pure, go to organifi.com/Chek20. That's Organifi.com/Chek20. Get 20% off with your promo code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K, 20. That's capitals, Chek20. Enjoy Organifi Pure. Since we're all part of the collective and we're constantly adding to the collective consciousness of humanity and the earth, what aspects of what came through you as you created your mandala and look at it now do you feel were actually messages for the people of the world?
One of the major things is that, and I'll show it a little bit here just to kind of talk about it, is the fetus here and the connection to the upper right at like the 1 o'clock position.
I just noticed that earlier yesterday or this morning when we were talking, or was it yesterday? Yesterday when we were putting the outline together, I noticed that the umbilical cord went to the hand, but only now that you're pointing it out, I see it goes all the way up to that star.
Yeah.
That's
And
cool.
Not only that, but how it moves, it goes from the fetus, it goes over the eyelid, it goes under the, like this circular shape here that then like the hand itself grabs onto where the sword is.
Yep.
And then it wraps around the sword itself and then goes under and then through these two dragons to the star.
Right.
So it's I think that the big message there is just really is, having a very clear mind.
Yes.
Going through the crown, like being that this sword is going through the crown, being like the crown chakra, the mind, the head, and really, aligning oneself.
Yes. And that could be one's North Star.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's the only one you've got on there.
Yeah.
Especially outside the circle, which we'll talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
But, what is the North Star? The North Star is probably the most important navigation tool before we ever had navigation instruments, right? Sailors used the North Star to
help guide,
navigate the whole world.
Right.
And not only sailors, Bedouins and people out in the forest and the deserts and all over the place. So, and the North Star really is a symbol for your dream, your direction in life.
Right. Yeah. So as a collective message, I really kind of go back to sort of the idea is that, living one's dream.
Yeah.
And living in one's, I guess, call it one's myth as well, to really, we'll find the right sort of, story, we'll find the right abundance, we'll find the right things if we're constantly going back to source in ourself that actually is helping us. And it's been helping us our entire life. Mm-hmm. Just being able to slow down and pay attention to that so that we're actually becoming more in alignment with what is true for us versus what's not true for us.
Right.
And I think that's a big message that I look at the mandala now and start to see that even more so, that's more on the collective versus just the individual, myself having created it.
I think one of the challenges of identifying what's true for us is that we're in such a mental era. We're in Gebser's model, we're in the mental phase of conscious development. So Gebser's model starts with archaic, which is the earth itself, the mineral kingdom. And then it goes to the magical level of consciousness, which is, the people that lived long, long ago and were living very much in nature, even 1 million years ago. And then it goes to the mythic level, and then it goes to the mental level, and then now we're entering the integral level where all of these things merge into one level of consciousness. But the point I'm driving at is we have such a mental culture and all the social media and all the, we're getting hit with memes constantly, and many of them are weaponized. And so we're also brought up, many of us, 85% of the world population claims religious affiliation, which means those children were programmed into a belief system. So the point that I'm making is when we're looking at, what do I believe or what's true for me, I think it's very, very important to be aware that the truth that lives in our head is often very different than the one that lives in our heart. And if we don't orient our life around doing the things that we love to do and doing our best to make our vocation the things we love to do, then we don't practice listening to our heart. So you get people that have, for example, look at all the people that were absolutely, what's the right word? I mean, caustic. Caustic to anyone that didn't get vaccinated for the first couple of years of COVID, who are all of a sudden now realizing they were dead wrong. And the very people they were attacking were listening to something more than their head. They were listening to their intuition, to their gut instincts. They were using their head to do research, to make decisions intelligently instead of just following the sheep and
being programmed. So there's an example of somebody could think that they're doing what's right for them, but they're excluding their heart and even their instincts, the wisdom of their body. So I'm throwing this in to say to everybody, you whenever you think you're doing what's right for you, you also want to make sure it's right for your heart and it's right for your body, because if what your head thinks is right is all that guides you, I got news for you. Almost everything in your head is somebody else's ideas.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Right? There's hardly anything in any of our heads that's somebody else's ideas. And so we can easily find ourselves living a life of what we think is our own creation, only to wonder why we're constantly having relationship problems, constantly having money problems, constantly having health problems. But in reality, what we're doing is just recapitulating a bunch of other people's ideas, most of which are making them money or giving them power and control over us. But once we live from our heart and we marry our heart to our head, there's a great book, I forgot the name of it, by John Youngblood. It's a book on mythology, but he says, only the heart can deliver justice to the mind. And I think that's a critical concept. And I think painting, for me, I paint because it's an expression of love. I don't paint because I have pressure on me to get a job done like a professional artist has to do. I paint because I'm a creative person. And if I don't express my creativity, it stresses me. I feel like a good analogy is when you got to take a poop, but you keep telling yourself you don't have time. And the next thing you know, you find yourself constipated and feeling miserable and going, damn it, I wish the hell I would have just stopped.
Right.
And so if I don't express the creativity in me in ways that with art, because it doesn't matter what I paint, but like when I'm designing a course or writing a series of books like I am right now, I have to be very, very careful about what I put into the painting, so to speak, because it's got to produce a specific outcome for the student or for the reader. But I can sit down and paint on a canvas, and if I feel like shit, I can just paint the feelings that I have, and then I always feel better. It's like I've moved that poopy feeling out onto the canvas and it's left my body. And I think that's another important aspect of art, is knowing that you can use it to alleviate emotional stress.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple times where I had one of my biggest mentors when I was going through Art Center. He's a gentleman named Jay Chapman. He taught creativity, taught time management, but just getting the feelings out was like an enormous aspect of the process. And I would say that just even that alone is what allows us to be creative, is just by getting those emotions out, like whether it's anxiety or fear or anger, just getting it out of the system. And it can literally just be, I don't know, just getting a pencil or paintbrush and just like getting the anger out, just being like, just pushing it out. And then it's like it clears up so much more of our life when we have those feelings out. Then we can focus on peace and harmony and joy and love and the things that really actually are more resonant, more fun to actually play with than more of these, negative emotions that just get clogged up in our system.
Yeah. Looking at your art, we talked about this a little earlier. I'll share it for the listeners. As a therapist, an art therapist, and having studied mandala therapy quite extensively, when you're looking at a mandala, the most important expression of the individual that's painting it is the dead center, which is right where you have that fetus in the eye, which is your third eye, because this does represent you, doesn't it?
Right.
So
it's literally, I mean, these are literally my eyes in terms of like I took a photo and painted them from my own eyes. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So the mandala represents the self as a whole. So if you take a circle, like say you're using a compass to make a circle, and then right where the needle anchors itself in the canvas or on the page, that would be the central point of the mandala. So that would be the masculine expression. Okay, so that point, if you put a dot there, the rest of it would be empty except for the border. So the dot represents, in Tantra, that represents Shiva being born, the god of creation. And the empty space between the center dot and the circle itself, so everything around the central dot, is the womb of the divine feminine, or Shakti, who gives birth to Shiva, who is her consort, her lover, her child, and Shiva, of course, represents the entire created universe. But she is invisible. She is the source of power. She's the source of gestation. She's the empty that becomes full. So everything around the circle is in gestation, and it says something. So these things, these symbols, everything around the central position is what's in gestation. So this is Jonathan's 2023 mandala. So it says from the point of origin of the painting that this is all in gestation. So just like a woman gets pregnant when the sperm meets the egg, and then it begins its mitosis. One cell becomes 2, 4, 4, 8, and that goes all the way up. It does 56 divisions, if I remember right, and you have about 100 trillion cells. And so this art symbolizes that this right here is something that is coming into manifestation in the now, but this is part of the gestation process. So you could almost say this is the blueprint for the guiding of the creation of that being. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if this was just like a architect builds plans for a house or a carpenter follows the plan, this would be the beginning, a small version of the house, and this would be what the architect or the builder is using to create that, because this represents you. So symbolically, this says Jonathan is giving birth to a new expression of himself in 2023, and what he's going to give birth to, what this being is going to express in the world, has something to do with all these archetypes. So, what I was asking you earlier is, what does that fetus represent to you?
Yeah, I mean, so it's calling in new film projects, calling in new just creative projects in general, music videos, film projects, more paintings, more drawings, just more ways to express my creativity outside of, I've, even in the last 3 months, I mean, I've been creating songs, not like musical to the point of like, being, I would say worthy of like Spotify, but for myself, sort of like we were talking about with just art in general. It's like I'm just creating things. So it's a method of just constantly moving through new ways to express myself and have those ideas all interrelate in different ways.
Yes, good. And so now there's a lot going on in there. Your face is particularly, your third eye is the central theme. As we've spoken about, and we talked about that, what I'd like to know is, you've mentioned what the third eye, the fetus in your third eye, which is all your new creative products. What do you feel the general message is from your soul regarding the rest of the imagery in the womb to represent you? So what is all this saying about Jonathan's life in 2023 is the question.
I think a lot of this is just, again, going back to, it's like, a lot of architect of the soul, but really raising vibrational consciousness in myself and also in those who are, viewing or experiencing the art that I'm creating.
Well, it clearly worked. I mean, everybody in the classroom, a lot of people couldn't even talk for a while. I mean, honestly, we all had this moment of, how do you describe it? I mean, it's like when it would be like if you walked into the gym and you saw someone squat 1,500 pounds and you never even knew that was possible. And the bar was bending so much you thought it was going to snap, and you wouldn't even be able to talk. You'd say, like, this is beyond steroids. This is, what is this guy, bionic? It would shock you to see a human being do something like that. And so when we all looked at it, plus we all knew we only had one day, we are all in this state of like, how do you express yourself? You were so drawn into it. There wasn't really a way to speak for a few minutes. It's like, it was like an awe, like what on earth? But somehow it spoke to all of us. I mean, it spoke to me deeply because I recognized the symbology in there right away. I'm like, wow, this guy's tapping into the collective unconscious in a heavy way. What correlation do you feel that your own soul's message to you in 2023, how does that represent humanity? You know, you're part of the collective unconscious. So if you were channeling not just for you, but for the year of 2023 as a message to the rest of us, what do you feel the art spirit was using you as a medium to share with everybody? I mean, here you are on my podcast, right? You're talking to potentially 50,000 people right now.
I wasn't really, that part wasn't ever like factored into it. It was just more like, I got to just.
Well, that's why it's called the collective unconscious.
Right.
I'm just asking you to get conscious and look at it now.
Yeah.
From that perspective.
For me, it's, again, there's like, the black on the outside is, the collective unconscious, and sort of I'm calling in all of those ideas that need to then be alchemically like transmuted through into a higher form of consciousness. Right. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's like, there's film reels that are coming in from the outside on each of the corners, and those are coming in and sort of like bringing that energy into the mandala. Right. To then, go through the gestation period to then give birth to new consciousness. Right. So that's really, I think the simplest way I can describe what I, and bringing to the collective. Right.
And maybe hold it up again, because there's something to point out there that I didn't realize actually until you said it to me. I mean, I'd looked at this thing many times, but you actually, now for all of you that have seen a film reel like they use on a movie projector, right? A standard film reel, if you look there, you can see the 4 holes. You can even see the holes in between where you could put your fingers in to grab the film reel if it was empty, where normally you would see just the film, the side of the film from the lateral side, not like you're looking in from the side. So it's like taking a roll of tape and turning it sideways. Yep. And you're looking at the film reel. So if you can see the image, you will actually see that it almost looks like he traced the film reel that holds the film, and the whole art fills the film reel, which is very, very cool concept, because the reason it's cool is because it's really like a clairvoyant vision. So, for example, I've got the ability that if you handed me a film reel, I could hold it up to my third eye or just look at it with my third eye, and I would have a whole myriad of images coming up, and I would have to paint it like that. So it's almost like you've turned the film of your life in 2023 sideways and looked through all the frames at once in parallel process instead of a linear process like a film strip running through a projector.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really good, I appreciate that, because that's a lot of what I imbued into it as I was creating it, because I was calling in so much story and so much of that. It's just my first love in life is film. It's I mean, I love drawing, I love painting. I mean, one of the biggest art inspirations I had as a kid was seeing Michelangelo's David in Florence and just being like, how did somebody? I can't comprehend it. Yeah. But it was film that really shook me to my core, where I was like, I can't believe what you can do with this art form to create ideas and to move people through time and space where they're not conscious of it. Yeah. But we're, as artists, consciously moving the collective through time and space to another dimension, to another point in their life. They might be going through the roughest thing in their life, and that story or that song, whatever that is actually moving them, and they can then be transported to the next space where they go, I don't know what happened, but I feel better.
Yes. And the challenge with that, of course, is the same thing is true of the sorcerers who use exactly that medium to take people's minds where they want it to go, to get them to behave the way they want them to behave. And the whole COVID psyops has been a 5th generation warfare of the mind. And, that's point being is you can use the same technology to control people and do negative things as you can use film to do positive things.
Absolutely.
And any sort of video, whether it be computer generated or, actually film with a camera like you would film a football game or something.
You know, turmeric's really, really hot now. There's a lot of scientific research on it, but they're not all created the same. So I brought Autumn Smith on to tell you about Paleo Valley's turmeric complex so you know exactly what the benefits are and why you, like me, should get your turmeric complex from Paleo Valley. Autumn, tell us about your turmeric complex.
At Paleo Valley, we are big believers in food as medicine. And so turmeric, of course, it has beat drugs out. We know it's anti-inflammatory. We know it has brain benefits. We know it has joint benefits. But what most people don't know is that a lot of turmeric supplements only contain one isolated compound of turmeric called curcumin. And so what we did instead was create a complex. We added organic turmeric and then ginger and rosemary and clove, which were some of the most DNA protective spices studied. And we created a complex. We added organic coconut powder and pepper for absorption. And so we've created a really high quality, highly bioavailable turmeric complex that will hopefully help you to feel your best. And all you have to do to check it out is go to paleovalley.com. That's PALEOVALLEY.com. And you can use the code CHEK15, that's lowercase CHEK 15 to save 15%.
Let's have some fun for the listeners, because the real thrust of why I wanted to do this podcast with you is because it was obvious to me as an art therapist that I shared with you what I thought was going on as it relates to you as I broke it down as a therapist. But I'd like to go through these symbols for the listeners and see how this might touch upon their life. So the first thing, as we discussed, the umbilical cord comes out and goes right to the sword in the hand of what is probably a male by the look of it, which is the Ace of Swords. The ace, all aces are beginnings. Swords is the air element, which relates to the mind.
Mm-hmm.
The sword is the symbolic representation of mind, because to think a thought, you have to cut it out from the whole.
Right.
So in alchemy, logos means the matrix, and cutter means you have to cut something out of the matrix. So if you just say, look over there, it doesn't mean anything. But if you say, look over there at the black cat, the sword cut everything else out of over there and directed your mind to the black cat. So Ace of Swords is saying that we are using our mind in 2023 to create new beginnings, but that sword is going right through the crown, which is a symbol for the mind, the head, but crown, Kether, is at the top of the Kabbalah, the tree of life in Kabbalah, which represents God creating infinitely.
Right.
So when we look at that symbol and these symbols right here, do you know what the symbol means? I don't know if you're aware of
the actual sword or the
No,
other?
these ones, these little wavy ones.
So for those, they were just indicated as like more energy, vitality, like sort of like fiery feelings.
You know what that actually represents symbolically? I can show you in symbol dictionaries.
No, not off the top of my head.
That's the symbol for fecundity.
Ah.
Do you know what fecundity
No.
is? Means if a woman's fertile, ovulating and healthy, she's in a state of fecundity. If a man has a lot of vital sperm, he's in a state of high fecundity.
Okay.
So it means the capacity to produce new life. Those symbols mean there is a lot of potential in your year to produce new life or new things. So your libido is what you draw from to create things, right?
Right.
It's your core life force energy. So this says that in 2023, you're going to have the fecundity to use your mind to create new things, which will begin first as ideas, because that's the Ace of Swords, right? So swords is the mind or the air element. So first you have to conceive, perceive and conceive before you can embody.
Okay.
So this says in 2023, if we look at that as a collective symbol, it says we are going to give birth to new ideas, but we're going to have to use the sword of discernment to make sure that we want to give birth
to those ideas.
Or we could end up giving birth to more ideas that imprison us or degrade us or separate us and cause more racial tensions and sexual tensions, etc. Then if you count the flowers you have on the crown, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that is number 5 is always the symbol of challenge. It means you're at the tipping point. 5 is the 13.1 mile mark in a marathon, the halfway mark. And that's where most people start talking themselves out of finishing the marathon. If you're in the middle of building a project, 5 is the point at which it's the most challenging, but if you get through it, it's downhill from there. So symbolically, 5 always means some kind of strife. If you go with Hegel's concept of how a creative process unfolds, it's thesis, what's the idea?
And then the antithesis.
Antithesis is the 5.
Okay.
Synthesis is 9. So we start the idea, 1. We begin developing it, and we run into trouble because we realize that the materials aren't right, or we can't get this, or we can't, or we have employees that are sick, or whatever it is. That's the 5. That's the antithesis. So what this is saying, the crown is saying that you're going to create many new things. You have the possibility to create new things, but you're going to have to go through the trial of implementing these things, because we all have bad habits that we have to overcome.
Right.
Taking shortcuts, biohacking, junk food, believing anything you see on social media, believing vaccines are good for you without investigating them. That's the 5.
Okay.
So this is saying that we must use our mind, and that we have the fecundity to create something new, but in order to manifest it, we've got to get through the 5 of our own mind. And a great analogy is you experienced it. You got in my cold plunge and it's cold in there.
Yeah.
And you see your mind's telling you one thing, but your body's telling you another.
Right.
The mind says, I don't know if I want to get that cold. The mind says, I should get out of here. But the body says, oh, this is really good. Right? So the mind's giving you the 5, but the body's saying, no, you can make it. So the fecundity, if you have enough fecundity, then the body will tell the mind to be quiet and pay attention to what's happening. But if you're not healthy enough, you'll have low fecundity. You won't have the life force energy to make it through the sticking point. The sticking point in a lift is the hardest point in the lift.
Is that like the bottom of the lift?
No.
Okay.
It's the hardest point biomechanically.
Okay.
So, for example, in a clean and jerk, there's the initial pull that you get the weight off the ground, and then there's the second pull as it passes your knees, where you have to accelerate the weight fast enough, get it high enough to get under it.
Okay.
So the second pull is the sticking point. Most people can get it off the ground, they just can't accelerate it fast enough to get under it. Okay, so if you think about a squat, for example, as you're lowering the bar and your knees are bending, as your thighs are going more toward parallel, your spine has to bend forward. So now you're at a biomechanical disadvantage because your knees are bending, which is making them less efficient. As the more you bend the knee, the less strength you have. The more you bend the hip, the less strength you have. And now that your spine's moving forward, it's putting greater and greater leverage against your low back. So there's a point where in the squat, as your thighs reach parallel, that your spine, your hips, and your knees are all under the maximum stress and the least biomechanically efficient position. That's the sticking point. So the 5 in a lift is the sticking point.
Okay.
So we are facing a sticking point, and the archetype is saying that the sticking point is really our own ideas, and that we have the energy to give birth to new ideas, but we must use our minds together. And you see you have red, safety and security, yellow, who am I, self, and blue, creative expression, fifth chakra, voice, and communication.
And also the purity of the white behind, let's underline it. Yeah.
Very beautiful. So then if we follow the clock, which represents the flow of time, we come next to tarot number 7. So that in tarot is the charioteer, and interestingly, 2 and 2023 adds up to 7. This is a 7 year. It's a chariot year. So what does the chariot represent to you, since it's your mandala?
Sure. So the charioteer to me is somebody who is actually moving through time and space. The also balanced with both the sun and the moon. So there's a lot of balance in there as well. Now, I didn't depict the entire charioteer or any of the cards completely just because of the shapes that they were actually inlaid in. Mm-hmm. But for what I wanted to actually show was just that idea that the charioteer is sort of like, that balancing point for the year. That's, it's a really simplistic kind of view of it. And then obviously with different, what is it? 7 of the blue dots here. There's 3 white dots. And then just the amount of using the stars and also the different colors to depict, again, like vitality with the red, the intelligence with the yellow, and also the purity with the white as well.
Yeah. Now, interesting too, midnight is the beginning of a day, right?
Right.
So if we say this is the beginning of the year, this would be January, February, March. We're just coming into April. So we've just gone into this phase and we're just coming out of it to here now. Now those 3 wave lines, what do they mean to you?
So for me, I added these as this would be water.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's also, if you look in symbology, that's the symbol of spirit. That, or a line like a lightning bolt, or a jagged line like a
yep.
That's spirit.
Okay.
So this says spirit. Now the number 3 relates to the Holy Trinity, which means how God goes from the invisible, unknowable into the manifest reality. So you take that spirit, the Holy Trinity, the capacity to create, the chariot. The charioteer represents the need for balance, because in most chariot cards or tarot cards, such as Rider-Waite, you have a male and a female sphinx, black and white, which represents 2 polarities of consciousness, yin and yang, but there's no harness to the chariot.
Right.
Because the chariot is directed by the power of the charioteer's mind, just like a lot of UFOs are said to be directed. There is no steering wheel. They actually become part of or one with the craft, and it moves based on their mental instructions.
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing I remember in looking at your 2023 mandala that you showed me was the how you depicted the charioteer. And when I was interpreting it myself, I was like, it's the idea that the charioteer is just there and then it's moving at the speed of Earth.
Yeah,
like as it's rotating, because it's planted there. And I love that idea of like how it's so balanced that then it just is actually moving within. Like it's not having to have the Sphinx move it for it.
Right.
It's just planted.
Yes, that would be one depiction. The Sphinx, both the Sphinx represent the polarities of mind, which is really saying that the chariot that the charioteer is in moves at the speed of thought.
Speed of thought. Okay.
So wherever you think, if you think you're unhappy, then at the speed of thought, you're unhappy.
Mm.
If you want to be on the sun, then all you got to do is direct your consciousness to the sun like a remote viewer, and you will be on the sun. You don't need to travel 93 million miles to get there, because really the sun's part of you. That's the whole secret of remote viewing. To be a remote viewer, you have to get the idea of the sun's over there and I'm over here out of your head, and go into a non-local connection with the sun, which means just like there's no distance for you to get to your stomach. It goes wherever you go, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's part of you. So from a spiritual perspective, the sun is like an organ in the body of us.
Ah.
But we just see it as outside of us. But it's actually inside of us, because the illusion is that the skin of your body represents the border of Jonathan, but that's an illusion, because everything that Jonathan is, he has to eat. That comes from outside of him. He has to drink. It comes from outside of him. He has to breathe. It comes from outside of him. He has to eat food that couldn't be here without photosynthesis, which came from the sun. He couldn't be alive without the moon regulating the tides to keep everything alive. That's a long ways away. So the illusion is that Jonathan's sitting right here, but the bigger truth is Jonathan's everywhere, and that's why this painting is archetypal, because I'm inside of you too.
Right.
And you're inside of me.
Right.
But if we look at the charioteer, he has a lot of life force energy. He's got the power of the Spirit of the Holy Trinity, which is Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. So he would represent the Son. And the charioteer has to maintain balance and focus, or he will not arrive at his destination. And the charioteer is also a spiritual warrior who has to stand up for and protect what is essential to life, family, friends, the world, etc. So, and you know, when you look at what's been going on in the world, we have a few congressmen and just a few people protecting our rights and trying to bring the truth of COVID and all this stuff through congressional hearings. And there's people like Robert F. Kennedy and Children's Health Defense and many other lawyers entering lawsuits against the criminals that have set us all up. So it's showing us that we have to stay balanced. We cannot get too lost in the world, yet we have to give birth to something which is going to require that we do the work of the Ace of Swords to get past our own bad habits and participate, and we have the energy to do it. And the charioteer is saying, in order to do it, you have to stay balanced, you have to stay focused, and you have to have discernment. Sound about right?
Sounds crystal clear. Yeah.
Now, so we move down to what would be about the 4 o'clock position. And why don't you share what that means to you and what the symbol is there for you?
Sure. So this is the Ace of Wands, and the Ace of Wands, very similar to the Ace of Swords, also has the fecundity that you're talking.
Fecundity.
Fecundity. Sorry,
Yeah.
Fecundity that you're describing, and you know, there is another hand, sort of this one kind of coming out of like a cosmic sort of shape.
Yes.
Having the wand, but the difference in terms of how the wand and the sword is, so the sword's sort of going towards a point,
Yes.
whereas the wand is sort of coming out in terms of like a funnel, if you will.
Right.
So there's a sort of like that, I guess, you know, convergence versus divergent.
Right.
And also just again, kind of it mimics a lot of the things from the swords, but they play off of each other, and then also being more like the earthly realm versus an air element like the swords. It's just the idea of like grounding. So a lot of things that if you cut this and bisect it down, everything is going to be on, you know, this side is going to be on the earthly realm, and everything here is going to be more on the heavenly realm.
Well, interesting, in tarot, you know, wands is the symbol of fire.
Mm-hmm.
So it means transition. It means spirit. Fire illuminates the dark. Fire can turn a solid into a liquid, rocks into metal, and metal into something you can pour. Fire represents the trial of life, trial by fire, initiation. The wand is a symbol of wisdom. So in tarot, the wands represent wisdom. And so wisdom is the accumulation of the experiences you've gained that have produced knowledge, but it's not just knowledge, it's the essence. Like if you could read 10 books on a topic and then go put it to work and try it, but when I said ultimately in one sentence, what did you learn from all that? That would be the wisdom.
Ah, okay.
So whenever you see wands in tarot, it represents wisdom. So 10 of wands is 10 times the wisdom that 1 of wands is. Ace of Wands means we're using wisdom to make a transition, but we need to gain more through the process. 2 of Wands, 3 of Wands, 4 of Wands, 5 of Wands, etc.
Okay.
And then you have a lot of fecundity there. Now, interesting too, I don't know if you've noticed this, that's a right hand and that's a right hand. Both of them are masculine.
Right, and one's over and one's under.
Yes,
Yeah.
so over would be more of a masculine, and under would be more feminine.
Right. So like supination, supination and pronation. Right.
Yeah. So the under would be I'm supporting you. The over is I'm repressing you, and those that are repressing us are using the sword of their own ideas and their own mind to create what they want us to do, but we have the power to use our own sword and our own eros, masculine, to go create what we want to create. And there's your 5, them creating what they want versus us saying, no, we don't want to be in your electronic jail, for example. No, we don't want our bodies poisoned with a fake vaccine or whatever the hell they got going on. So why that's important is because look at all the battle between the sexes going on.
Yeah.
And look at all the challenges we're having from all this patriarchal dominance with no feminine energy in there. And the women that are involved in things like CDC and Anthony Fauci's wife, they're all masculinized. They're boys with breasts, to put it politely. So you get these masculinized Margaret Thatcher types that are willing to destroy anything. They're just like they're kind of like men in women's bodies. They behave like men. So the point is what I see archetypally being shared here is that the charioteer is protecting life from this masculine dominance, and that we may have to use the masculine to make the change that we've got to make, but we can't really do that without the feminine, right? We just create more fire on top of fire and burn the whole place down, and that's what we're really at risk of as we move through the year, because we're now in the beginning of April. So if you say that's June, this is what represents what's going on in the world right now. And you look at the colors, the green is the color of love, and it's the color of the plant kingdom and growth. And lo and behold, what are they trying to do? They're trying to make us all plants in a plantation. This is what I learned from James Wanless, James Tunney, who has studied transhumanism, tech bondage, and all this, written several books about. He's been on my podcast multiple times. He's a genius. And so he's showing very clearly through historical record that the same people that were the plantation owners who then created the Industrial Revolution are now, look at Bill Gates, fake meat, all grown from plants inside of vertical farms based on genetically modified organisms. So they're trying to turn us into plants that they can control. They control the lighting. They control the doors. They control the airflow. You'll own nothing and be happy. You're a plant. And so you here have, instead of the classic brown wand, which represents a walking stick or something that carries you through life, we have green, which is more symbolic of the plant, but it's also symbolic of the heart. And that almost looks like you've sectioned the heart in half, like the bottom half of a heart there, and those look like arteries more than branches. So symbolically, it's saying to me that we are not only in a situation where we've got to be careful what we plant or how we get planted, but we've got to stay in our hearts so that we don't get too caught in the head. So that's a quick overview of that. Red, safety and security; green, heart chakra; yellow, who am I? The self. Blue, that's more of a dark blue indigo. That's the sixth chakra, which is make sure that you use insight. Don't just make mental decisions without thinking about it. Use insight. Look into yourself. Make sure that you're asking, what does my body have to say? What does my heart have to say? And how does that relate to what my mind says? Those are some of the key features that I see. The hand is also symbolically about creation. It's hard to create without hands. So the hand is touch, the hand is holding someone's hand, and the hand is creativity. So it's saying to me that we have to hold on to our wisdom and work together to create new life. And we have to make that decision ourselves and be the charioteer.
Without like a lot of constriction either. So it's it's a very gentle hold.
Yeah, there's the nurturing element.
that we need to all bring in. We need to bring the feminine of ourselves to the table, really. Anything else you want to add on that? Since it's your art, I'm just interpreting it.
I think that the other aspect of this is just like that it's more like the explosive kind of nature of that of the wands in terms of like using the imagination and to really need that as in like a fiery element to create and imagine from.
Yes, good.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I imagine you know that magnesium is one of the minerals that people in North America are the most deficient in, but it's an extremely important mineral to have in your diet regularly. And believe it or not, Bioptimizers has improved what was already well known to be the best magnesium formula out there called Magnesium Breakthrough. So I've got Wade Lightheart with me to explain what it is they've done to improve this already excellent formula. Wade, what is new about your new Mag Breakthrough formula?
Well, it's called sucrosomial magnesium. So we have 7 different types of magnesium in Magnesium Breakthrough because they're uptaken by different parts of the body. But a new type of magnesium has been created called sucrosomial. And what it shows in the research in science is that it's actually even more absorbable by the body, particularly inside of the brain, which is a big aspect to enhance neurotransmitter formation, as well as ensuring the rest and relax response in the nervous system that a lot of people will take magnesium for. They find it, clocks them down, helps them sleep better, allows for the relaxation of striated and smooth muscle tissue in the body, which creates an energetic relief. And so when we added sucrosomial, we were able to demonstrate inside our lab facility that we were able to get better improvements. Of course, we have a partnership with the Birch International University. We have some patents we're working on, which will kind of relay some of these things. But sucrosomial was a no-brainer when we added to the formula, improved the results or improved the uptake. And the reports back from our testing team were like, wow, we get more results with less caps. And that's always the goal for our company.
That's excellent. I love it. I always say, and people have probably heard me say it before, I'm so amazed how you guys are constantly and always improving and working your best to not only make better products for us, but it doesn't seem to me that it gets more expensive as you make them better. So that's a real gift to the world. Thank you. Where can people get their new Magnesium Breakthrough formula?
All you need to do is go to www.magbreakthrough.com/living4D. Put in Paul10, you get 10% discount on your first bottle. And of course, if you order multiple bottles, you can get an extensive discount on that as well. And like everything else we sell, 365-day money-back guarantee. If this isn't the best magnesium you've ever taken in your life, we demand that you tell us and we can give you your money back. But I think you're probably going to demand, hey, can I get more of this for my family?
That's probably more the truth. So that's magbreakthrough.com/living4 and then the letter D, code Paul10. Enjoy deeper relaxation and better nutrition with Mag Breakthrough.
So then we move to the 6 o'clock position, and you've got the Hierophant archetype there, which in the Marseille deck, as you know, is the Pope. And there's also a Pope S, which in Rider Waite is number 2, the High Priestess, which is the feminine complement to the masculine Pope. Now, the Pope, of course, represents the dictators that control the canon, right?
Right.
So that's the politicians, that's the World Economic Forum. Those are the people that are building the plantation around us, right? They're trying to force us into digital currency, vaccinations, and all sorts of shit. Now, from a personal level, the Pope represents the mentor, the guide, the master, or the teacher that has cultivated wisdom in these 3 levels you see on his staff: the physical, the emotional, and the mental, or body, mind, and spirit is another way to look at that. But that's classically, and that's why he's got 3 levels to the crown on his head: body, mind, and spirit. So the true master, the true mentor on the hero's journey, which you have to have the help from, or you will never be able to deal with the challenges that the hero faces. This says,
around June, we have to be very, very conscious of who we listen to and believe in as leaders, because if we get the wrong leaders, we will be misled physically, mentally, and spiritually, and will not arrive at the destination. The Pope is supposed to be the one that gets you to heaven.
Right. And also added, the earth element here. So it's like there's being at the bottom of the mandala, it's also a lot of grounding.
Yes.
So it's just like having that sure-footedness at that moment is really important before we then ascend up into the other realms of the mandala itself. I also was really conscious of him staring at his hand, then pointing up. So it's this relationship of the different symbols, but his eyes pointing to his hand that then brings it up to the top of the mandala as well.
Well, what's cool is we've now got a left hand, and he's holding the staff, the wand, the fire, the creative force of body, mind, and spirit. So now the feminine manifests itself in the process of harmonizing body, mind, and spirit. So that's nice. And the feminine, that's the hand, is blue, which is the color of mind. So that means here that we have feminine input, or we should be accessing feminine leaders to give us guidance of body, mind, and spirit, not just masculine leaders, or we are likely to get lost. And also, if I remember right, those 3 lines represents yin in the I Ching.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
Yang has a broken line, so I don't remember them exactly right now, but 3 solids like that is yin. So in the I Ching, that would be a feminine energy coming in. So that's pretty cool. So, and 5, tarot number 5, there's your tipping point.
Right.
So it says something happens around June that becomes a tipping point for better or worse.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in my own personal life, there's definitely some projects that are coming in June that are some new film projects. So that'll be, I know where that's sort of leading, but it'll be also interesting as the collective, in June, what we're all going to be receiving as our own, tipping points for the year.
Well, we might extend you to the collective and say, what kind of films are they going to be releasing to try to convince us of things? How well would they be using their sorcery? And will we be smart enough to recognize the mimetic technology being used against us? And so I could go into the whole science of memes, but that'd be a very long discussion. What is the next symbol now? It's around 6 to 7 o'clock there.
Yeah, so this next one is the Ace of Pentacles, and with that,
Earth element
as well. And there's I want to say another sort of grounding aspect of the mandala itself, but just knowing that, I guess for me, the symbolism in that is the monetary sort of value of things as well, in terms of how I'm going to live my year, what's needed. Sometimes there might be the mind, the creativity, but there's also a financial aspect to life that we need to be aware of and conscious of in order to allow things to flow and move.
This flowering represents, opening. You think of the flower as the eyes of the plant. It's looking at the sun. It's worshiping the sun. It's drinking the sun in. It's really embodying the sun. So the flower is always a really good symbol. This looks like a sunburst, right? And we see that we have a circle in the center. We have a circle here. We have a circle here. And we have a circle here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 circles. Well, what's interesting is 4 is the symbol of completion. So this would suggest that with regard to growth and life on Earth, and here you have new plants coming into being, right? They're flowering, they're reaching out. This is kind of like the lotus extending itself out of its flower, that something comes to completion in your life, maybe a project or maybe getting a new contract to do something. But 4 is the symbol of completion. So whenever you see the number 4,
it means you've gone through winter, spring, summer, fall, or
Okay.
the beginning, middle, end, and rest. Om, ah, oo, underscore.
Okay.
So there's the 4 stages of Om, which is nested in everything. So it looks to me that there's the beginning of a new way of relating to the world that somehow brings something into completion that helps us all understand what's important, is what I'm intuiting this. I'm not, this is not a rational, logical, I'm not reading somebody else's newspaper.
Right.
So that this is what, as an art therapist, this is how I interpret symbols. And of course, we won't know because we're not there yet. So this is going to be around this between the 7th and the 8th month of this year. So between July and August. And my birthday is right in there. So maybe that's something special for me.
What's also interesting about this too is, so on the outside, and also bring this up for the viewers to tell. So on the outside, there's 2 dragons, yin, yang. One's white, benevolent. One's black, maleficent.
Yeah.
But their hind legs are in this position
They
here.
are.
And they're
Right over top of that.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's an egg and they're trying to see who gets to have it. It's interesting because it looks like you're looking at the top of a Fabergé egg.
Ah, yeah.
If you look down at it, like a painted egg.
So that's all. Like I felt like that was something that was really interesting in terms of as it was, being, painted through me. This kind of like clutches or something that's like, this is going to be a sticking point as well.
Yeah.
And even some of the, the outline sort of symbols on the very end, like these are just like eyes that sort of symbolize sort of like darkness or like monstrous things that there's going to be some precarious things in there.
Yeah, they might be trying to steal the egg. And now the egg represents the earth element, right? Because it's the ace of coins. So the beginning of a new way of living on earth, which says to me, we got to get back to the earth. We got to get away from fabricated bullshit and lab crap and everything chemical and fake and synthetic, and we got to get back to reality is what that looks like to me. And this is people that maybe have an opposing opinion, like Ray Kurzweil, for example. He thinks you can just load all this onto a hard drive. Before we go on, I wanted to ask you, what made you use all these tarot symbols?
So for me, a big part of it was as I was channeling and sort of going through that process on the meditation, a big part of it for me was just like knowing that one of my like biggest inspirations in terms of design is Alejandro Jodorowsky, and just so there's like the colors were coming through, a lot of the actual symbols themselves were coming through from his art that I've seen in films and studied briefly in terms of my own, like, I'd say not as extensive as the knowledge that you have with tarot, but those were some of the underlying sort of reasons of like using the tarot within this, and then the numerology to help me sort of find some of the like the charioteer and the Pope and the lovers and justice were something that helped me in terms of looking at my year and just adding in the numerology of like what was showing in 2023 and breaking that down into 7. And then my birth date, just like kind of correlating the different symbols of the tarot to those numbers.
Neat. Well, you've got at the 9 o'clock position, and that's an interesting position. Number 9. Now, there's a 12-stage cycle here, but in the 10 system, 9 is the end of a cycle because 10 is the beginning of the next level of being or the next level of creation. So once you go from, if you think of it like floors in a house or in a multi-story building, you're not on the second floor until you step on the floor of the second floor.
Okay.
So the first step up the stairs would be 1, and when you step on the last step, that's number 9. But as soon as your foot hits the second floor, that's 10, which is the beginning of the next stage. Okay? So your art suggests that at this position, we're going to have to deal with the polarities of love, which is basically the male and the female meeting each other. And interestingly, you've painted Cupid there with his bow, which is all about Eros. And if you study Mark Gaffney's work, I have a phenomenal podcast with him from a little while back, but we get into exactly this. Cupid is all about Eros, and Eros in the Hebrew tradition, more so than the Greek, and as Mark presents it, is Eros is that which penetrates and creates novelty. See, if you are watching pornography, you cannot penetrate because the sex is, the woman's on the whoever your partner is in a television. They're not really there. And you can't create novelty because all you can do is masturbate, and that's the same thing over and over again. So Eros, in the context of the lovers, says you in your own life here are probably going to have to penetrate deeply to create novelty in whatever it is you're doing. It could be a new lover, and it could be a new project, could be a new professional relationship, personal relationship, spiritual relationship, could be the result of a deep shamanic journey. But from a collective perspective, it says when we get to this time of the year, which is going to be September, that we have to be ready to penetrate whatever it is that's got to be penetrated, which is the old ways of doing things, in my opinion, and we must create novelty, and we must do it in a way that harmonizes the sexes. Now, you've got two primordial symbols right out of Mark Gaffney's teachings, the circle and the line. The circle is feminine and the line is masculine. So you see the circle?
Yep.
And there's the arrow, the line. So the line just keeps on going. Males always want to leave home, go out into the world, go do your job. But the woman wants to hold the family together. So the feminine is the circle that holds us together. That's classically agape love, nurture. But the male wants to penetrate. I want to go get the deer, get the moose, go hunting, bring back the prize. And so you see here Cupid, and Cupid's arrow is right at 5 o'clock, and 5 is the challenge position in a process.
Mm-hmm.
So what this is suggesting to me is that through love, we must penetrate together and create novelty, and it will require the feminine circle and the masculine line to work together to have a clear sense of direction, the North Star, and make something happen together. And this spiral is a left-handed spiral, which means feminine energy is critical.
So this for me was, so if we go from like the water element to the earth, this would be wind, but also that.
Yeah.
And then what's interesting on the outside here is the heart too.
Yes, look at that.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
you have to have your heart in love.
yep.
And 6 is a number of harmony. And when is love best? When it is an act of harmony. So we really have Eros, agape, harmony, feminine, the strength and power of the sun, and you see the colors of the sun are red and yellow, which is safety, security, and individuality. So it suggests that we are going to have to work through issues of creating safety and security together to hold the circle together, which is going to require a balance of individuality and collective unity. And we have to do it with heart together, and it's going to need a lot of feminine energy for us to not get lost in the bad habits that got us in trouble. So that would be my quick interpretation. There's many other things. These things can be very deep, and sometimes when I do a report on a mandala, it takes me anywhere from 7 to 10 hours to write the report.
Wow.
Especially one like this. But so now we move up to the next symbol. We're here at about 10 o'clock. What does that represent?
Yeah. So just kind of like lead the eye a little bit more. It's so, we go from here, some animal, spirit animals here. So the eagle
represents big picture view, sharp vision from above, seeing the whole picture.
The lungs, other aspects like the of the body, the viscera, the guts, everything up here is being depicted
and
there.
If I could go back.
Yeah.
it's predicted the next big pandemic is a bird flu pandemic.
Oh, interesting.
And Bill Gates and others keep warning that it's coming, and there's all sorts of buzz out in the media now about all the birds being killed because of bird flu, and thousands and millions of chickens being killed because they've been told they've got to eradicate them with bird flu. So it may be that the bird is symbolizing something coming from that perspective as well. And the lungs, of course, is where we bring air in. That's the beginning of the 24-hour chi cycle. Without the lungs, there is no life. So, and that's prana, that's life force. And so those are some really important symbols. What's that one right there?
So this is the eagle actually flying.
I see.
So
Yes,
this
okay.
is perched, and then this one is flying.
Right.
And then the lungs bringing air, prana in, the gut, the viscera, sort of like the internal organs of the central nervous system.
A digestive process.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the symbol here is the cups.
Okay.
So the Ace of Cups.
Ace of Cups. So the beginning of something that has to do with love and emotion. That's what the cup symbolizes, is love, emotion, and connection. And is that meant to be a crown, or what is that?
No, it's in the Tarot de Marseille. It's this is how they depict how the cups look.
Uh-huh.
So it was a lot of it was just seeing how they depicted the Ace of Cups and then utilizing that as the symbol for that. But I think it can also be interpreted as a crown itself, very similarly.
Yeah, because it does have the look of a crown. I mean, it's a different looking crown. It look a little bit more Japanese, like Japanese style. You know how they build their buildings.
Yeah.
And there's some issues going on with Japan too. They're in a very dangerous position right now because of where they're located and who's around them. So there's all sorts of talk of Japan potentially being attacked by China, and I can't remember who's on the other side of them, but I was watching an interview with an expert on this, and he said Japan is really in a precarious position right now, so they're doing a lot to ramp up their military and defend themselves, and they're out in the middle of the water, right, which is cups. And so, yeah, something is beginning there.
Yeah, and sort of like the overflow of the cups themselves, sort of like that. And then there's like the sea or reservoir below it.
Right. Well, interestingly, now we're back to the top, which would normally be the 12, but you have the 8 position. So in Marseille Tarot, judgment is archetype 8. In Tarot Rider Waite, it's archetype 11. But as you've got the scales, it represents balance. So something has to come into balance by the 12th month of the year. So in your life, it means, whatever's going on needs to come to a point of balance right here. You've got these 3 symbols for spirit. They're all red. So it means there's something going on with the issues of the root chakra, safety, security, self-management, knowing what's important at the time. The person's body is gowned mostly in red, which is, again, safety and security. And 8 is also the infinity symbol put vertically. So if you look at 8 is also the symbol in my system for insight, introspection. It's the 8th step in my 10-step model. But it's also the inside in relationship to the outside. You understand what I mean by that?
Or maybe specify a little bit more in terms of the inside to the outside.
Well, the 8, you basically take a 0 and give it a twist to make an 8.
Yeah.
So the hole in the bottom would represent your inner self, and the hole in the top of the 8 would represent your outer self.
Okay.
So it means that those, in order for you to achieve your potential, the inside and the outside have to be in balance. So said another way, the soul and the ego, inside, consciousness within, has to be in balance with the way you express yourself in the world, or you're creating illusions. And that's what got us in trouble.
Okay.
And so it tells us that by the end of the year, our main concern has to be balancing in order to create safety and security for you, for yourself, and all of us, for each other and for the world.
But the good news is your scales are balanced, right? So if you had painted those things out of balance, I would be more concerned, but it is painted in balance. It also looks like bull's horns. Can you see that? It's almost like you're looking at a bull coming right at you. See the horns?
Yeah.
And the bull, of course, is Taurus, and bulls are notoriously hard-headed. They don't want to change their direction. And if you piss them off, they'll ram you and attack you. So it may be that we're dealing with some bulls, which, we know who the bulls would be. Like, Biden, I hate to call him a bull. He's really more of a, what do you call that? A blow-up doll that's powered by people with money that can't even think or talk. So we have to just send him lots of empathy and compassion because he's playing a very important role as a trickster for all of us. And that's the kind of stuff we've got to balance out, trickster versus reality and truth. And so, and also, interestingly, your white dragon is really got her hands close to, or his hands very close to that symbol. What do these symbols represent right here?
Yeah, so you have like the brain.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Use your brains.
Also, another spirit animal of the lion.
So being conscious of your individuality. The lion represents the ego or the self.
And then here is sort of, there's a relationship between this, and that is sort of like jaggedness, sort of like teeth. Like it's like the top of the movement of everything. It's like once it's balanced, it's got to go through that one last sort of moment. And then here we have essentially a naked body like flying through space, and then we have the sun and we have the moon before it basically is balanced between the two dragons that then moves through to the North Star here.
This also looks like DNA.
Yeah.
You see a vertical, it's like from your position, It's a vertical strand of DNA, and mRNA is all about DNA, right?
Yeah.
And the whole technology is to capture people by using electromagnetic frequencies to control their DNA. That's the vaccines were really never vaccines. They were remote control technologies. Most people aren't aware of. I've talked about it on several podcasts, but they've been researching. If any of you read the book Pirates of the Sacred Spiral by Len Horowitz, he documents very clearly that Carnegie and Rockefeller have been doing research for over 100 years now, ultimately on how to control people via their DNA. So you put graphene oxide and nanobots inside of you, you put mRNA that fuses with your RNA, and you wire people to 5G, and you can then control their emotions, their beliefs, and monitor every system in their body. And you got nanobots, which are sending and receiving information, so they turn you into a plant in a plantation that's being monitored exactly how Bill Gates monitors everything else. So they turn you into a digital target. So it may be that one of the things we have to do is balance technology with the realities of the earth, which would be a natural, intuition for me that we're coming to here. What do you think it means to you in your life?
Well, for me, I mean, there's definitely been some major trauma and strife and things that I've had to go through, which is last few years have been, I've been like realigning a lot of things, but getting those back into alignment and balance has been a tremendous task for me. And I find that this definitely kind of, helps me understand that a little bit more in terms of how I can, like a lot of the points that you were going to talk about too, or ask questions about with regards to, I think, as men, and like how we access creativity, I think that's another aspect is like, how do I balance that creativity inside of my own process of making films, drawing, painting, and designing new projects as they come around. So I think that that's a big, symbol for that is just being back in balance with, not only just the masculine and the feminine and the different polarities going on it's also in terms of getting all that in alignment so that I can move forward on, and create like almost, I don't want to get ahead of myself on a new, mandala, but like a new year, but I want to be able to be even more present with my art, even more present within the projects that I'm creating, so that it's like everything is created at the, going back to the idea of, we're thinking at the speed of thought. It's like being in that thought, and it's like, that's the moment, and it's all balanced as I go.
Yes. And isn't that just a metaphor for what we've all got to do in the world right now?
Yeah.
Be more present, be conscious of what we're creating.
Mm-hmm.
Monitor your thoughts. Is it really true?
Right.
Or is it someone else's program? Do I just do what the sheep are doing? There's an old saying by a very wise man, whatever direction the herd's going, go the other way for your own survival. And so you also have some nice green in there, which gives me a sense that there's positive energy there too, because green is the heart chakra. So it's all about balancing. The heart's in the middle of the upper three and the bottom three. So it's the great balancing organ, and it's the home of love. We're moving along towards the end of the podcast here. Whenever someone paints a mandala, if anything breaks the outer circle, it means that they're leaking into other dimensions, that they're not contained within themselves. Now, you're an artist, and you're channeling creative ideas. So when I look at this for you, I say, well, Jonathan has to go outside of himself, because that's where he gets new ideas. If you think of the traditional concept of the self as Jonathan sitting right there. But so you see that the symbol of the dragons and the film strip means for me as a therapist, we need to recreate our story. And we've got to be careful how we manage these two dragons, because those energies are involved in the writing of any myth or any story.
Right.
And if we get them wrong, then we either have too much destruction or it's too soupy goopy and not moving, i.e. too much feminine energy stagnates, too much masculine energy burns the house down. So it looks to me like we've really got to manage these two forces of creative energies in respect to all these symbols you've put in here. So these to me look like there's a lot of symbols from nature, and there's a lot about our bodies in here.
Yes.
Right? And the sun is the masculine, the moon is the feminine. Sun represents the annual cycle, that represents the lunar or monthly cycle. So this is the marriage of the male and the female that has to come to balance, right? And that's all about what's going on in the world. So without going through every one of these symbols, you see to me, and a lot of these are like the mouse. For one, some of these are symbols right out of Chinese astrology. I think we're coming into the year. I think this is the year of the rabbit, if I remember right. You got the elephant, which has the biggest heart and considered to have one of the longest memories of animals. You got the spider, which is about weaving a web,
right,
and feeding yourself without working too hard. The spider makes its web and just hangs out to catch. It doesn't go hunting. It waits, right? So we could go through these in great detail, but it seems to me that the dragons are weaving this web of creativity not only into your life, but from a collective unconscious perspective. It's saying that we have to be careful not to let these dragons take us too far out of ourselves, because we've got real issues to handle right here. Now, how that might be relevant is because the next great trick, according to Stephen Greer and many others, is to convince us that we're under attack by aliens, to redirect our attention away from the dirty tricks they're trying to play to enslave us electronically, and point our eyes toward the sky, and then pump a bunch of money into the military-industrial complex. But what most people don't know is that they've already have made these alien crafts, and they can even use very advanced holograms that look real, so they can trick people into think we're under attack, direct their attention away, classical magic trick, and then suck money, even more money out of them by scaring the hell out of them. So when I look at this as the collective unconscious, and knowing what I know from all my studies about what's going on, you could be saying that we've got to be careful not get sucked into a sci-fi film that takes us away from the real issues here and now on this planet.
Yeah, and also with the collective unconscious on the outside, it's like weaving those stories that's like, being careful to like discern like what's coming in.
Yes.
And like the dragons are really there for that reason. Like they are like the creators of consciousness, sort of like they're so connected to the fetus in terms of like what's coming. Literally, they're the umbilical cord goes through them. It weaves like almost and has like this is like an opening that goes through. So they're very careful to kind of discern like what's coming in and also what's going out.
Yes.
Because a lot of the problems that we've gotten ourselves into in life is not paying attention to anything that comes in and what goes out. And a lot of people don't want to pay attention to when they express something or let's just say like something like food. You eat something and then you take a crap and it's like
stinks the hell out of you.
Yeah, it's like,
poison.
I realize that I'm eating something bad. So then it's like, okay, I got to understand what I'm taking in so that then what I actually excrete is health, like I'm a healthy human being.
Or vaccinations that poison you, drugs that poison you. Look at all the transsexual drugs that poison you, puberty blockers that poison you. So we've got to be very conscious of what we're taking in. There's something else in there that I want to point out.
Okay.
Those dragons.
Yes.
I've studied origin myths from all over the world. The Chinese have an origin myth. In the Chinese culture, and they don't use the word God, but they often use the dragon. So here is a very powerful Chinese origin myth, and think of that painting while I tell it to you.
Okay.
The dragon's favorite hobby is to create universes. And each time the dragon breathes the new universe into existence, it is made of 2 baby dragons, one named Yin and one named Yang. And after the dragon breathes the new universe into existence, he looks at the 2 little dragons and says, the 2 of you can rest from managing your universe when you can get along. And so the world is our universe. And when we can manage the male and the female forces within us personally and collectively, we can rest from managing our world because we'll be getting along.
Deep wisdom there. I love that.
So
it's a great story.
If you look at all those archetypes in there, stay centered and stay balanced, the Chariot. Make sure you are being led by authentic teachers with legitimate wisdom and mastery of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual realms. Be conscious of the polarities of love so you don't destroy things. Don't just penetrate, but create novelty, because we need something new, and we've got to bring it all into balance, or those dragons may be what enslaves us instead of setting us free, and we're all involved, and it's going to require acts of creativity that have to come from insight, because we can't keep recapitulating the same ideas that got us in trouble in the first place. Einstein said, you can never solve a problem with the same thinking that created it.
Right.
So we have to go past habitual thinking, unconscious reflexive behavior, which is why David Bohm and Jung both said almost identically, real thinking is hard work. That's why most people just rearrange their prejudices and call it thinking. We can't do that. If we rearrange our prejudices and call it thinking, then Eros penetrates but does not create novelty, which means we just get more of the same. So we've got to be very, very conscious. What a freaking phenomenal piece of art. I think, honestly, now this is just my own opinion as an art therapist and a guy who's spent his life studying every aspect of human life, physiology, psychology, spiritual development, religion, metaphysics, quantum physics, everything that I have to know to be effective as a therapist, a human being, a husband, a father. I think you've channeled a truckload of the collective unconscious. And, it's easy for me to look at that. And I would be willing to bet you that if our podcast today was used as a prediction for what's to come, just as we talked about the different positions on the clock, the different months of the year, I think it wouldn't be hard at all to find that it's very accurate.
It would be really curious to, take a look at this in December, right? And
Yes.
Just to be like, all right, let's see how this laid itself out.
If you have a message for the world right now based on what's come through your heart and soul and what you've painted for yourself and everybody else, what's your message?
Well, I definitely think that the message has always been that we need to raise human consciousness.
Yes.
I think that we need to be more conscious of ourselves
Yes.
in relationship to others. We need to be, conscious in a relationship to Earth and the universe. I also think that we need to really cultivate our voices and our creativity.
Yes.
So that we are actually, again, creating novel experiences that actually better humankind.
Yes.
Better, the future for infinity, really.
You mean less digital pornography and more honest relationships?
Absolutely. Like the authenticity that comes from one's own life experience to then bring that into the world, because we all need your voice.
Yeah,
we all
need each other.
Yes.
We really do. Well, congratulations again. I know you're probably tired of hearing me saying how amazing that piece of art is, but it really is special. And I think it's exciting that you've made it available for anyone that wants to have a copy of it, because having listened to this, it's almost like you've given us a calendar for the year. And even if it's nothing but a reminder to choose a good mentor, to balance yourself in love, to stay centered in your chariot, take responsibility for yourself, to think of what real justice is physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, and to know that we are all in a state of beginning in the mind, in the spiritual realm or the fire realm, or in transformation in the earth realm, and beginnings in the management of our emotions and our feminine energies, which is really inherent to love, and it's bordering right on love, right? So, and we need to give birth to something, the gestation, and we need to look in and use our insight and inner vision, not just our physical senses. I don't think our physical senses are enough to get us through this.
No, we really need to go inward. It's a really big part of, it's like we've got to tap into that soul inside and just really be able to listen to it.
What a phenomenal share, and really great to be able to have this opportunity to do this with you. And I'm really grateful that you went to art school and had the discipline to learn the rules and then learn how to break them for your own creative self-expression. And once again, Jonathan, why don't you share where people can find out more about you and share any services that you offer? Are there services that you offer?
Yeah. So first I'll start with my website is jonathannageldesign.com.
Right.
For spelling, it's JONATHANNAGELDESIN.
IGN.
DESIGN.
Yeah.
I'm an artist, not a writer, I guess.
That's okay.
And then also, if you're interested in actually picking up the painting, I'll be offering prints. Same web address /products. You can find it from my website. I also, this isn't something that I do all the time, but I think that creativity is so important, and I've had mentors help me unblock.
Yes.
We're talking like massive things. And as an artist who's gone through, enough dark nights of my soul, I don't even think there's just one. I think that there's almost like an infinite amount of them. It's having another creative be able to listen with empathy and compassion to help actually another to, pursue their voice, to pursue their vocation, to actually feel that. So I can offer viewers other options like art, not necessarily to the level maybe of art therapy that you do, but also just to help them understand how art works, how to see, how to draw, how to paint. I have these ideas I've been sort of thinking about for this year to start to bring in, and I'd be more than willing to, with some very, hungry artists out there that are interested in how to cultivate this in themselves, I'm happy to talk with them and see if this is the right fit for them.
You mean like to consult them or to guide them as a coach?
Yes, absolutely. So sort of like an art coach, if you will.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that I'm constantly, evolving my films. If there are those who are interested in actually, more on the like helping to produce and make, larger films, I'm also open to that. I have a couple of ideas that are coming through this year in terms of more feature length films. The other thing is talked about the print, and also I do children's books, and I also make a lot of other art and graphic design as well. So I freelance, I do logo design, brand identity design. I'm open to talking to businesses that need an artist who's extremely thorough in terms of the process of actually designing a cohesive, idea and story for their business.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
What a great service. I might end up hiring you myself along the way, especially now that I know what you can do. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is a print that I would like to get myself because I think it's just such a really amazing forecast for the whole of humanity. And I hope that all of you got a chance to really see what it's like to be inside the mind of a really highly skilled artist that went through a lot of very deep training to achieve this level of mastery and has a mind that you can see penetrates the veil. I mean, I think Jonathan's one of these people that channels a myth in, and that might be an amazing reason to have him coach you, is because he could teach you to channel your own myth in. And I think it's very important for all of us right now to get clear on what our story is, right? Your story makes you or breaks you. It makes you strong or turns you into a weakling or someone that doesn't participate or someone that's really into it, or it turns you into someone that's addicted or someone that's balanced. So having the ability to have a mentor to teach you not only how to manage and use your creativity, but how to express it is phenomenal. And it was just fun for me, Jonathan, to hang out with you for a couple of days and just spend time with you and share our lives and to be able to talk to you and hear more about your story and get to know you better and see what's inside me. Because from the minute I saw that mandala, I'm like, I got to know what's inside this guy's mind, because that's not the ordinary mind that's doing that. I mean, I've looked at a lot of art in my life. I mean, I've been a therapist for 39 years, and I started studying and practicing art therapy in 2006. So, I've had, I don't know how many mandalas have been part of my healing therapy. I've done many, many clients that I only used one mandala to coach them for a year.
Wow.
Or more, and had radical changes in their life just on what they were able to tell me through a mandala that they couldn't find the words to say.
I want to add one other thing to this too, because I think that the viewers need to understand that. So I did this remotely. I did this from the comforts of my own home.
Yeah.
And when I remember it was a year ago, the previous year, I couldn't actually make it out here.
Right.
And I was like, oh man, there's not a way to, do this. And then when you offered that, I was like, this is perfect. This is a great opportunity to just, obtain this amazing knowledge, to be a part of that soul family that went through it.
Yes.
That alone was powerful. But I think that anybody who has the opportunity to take this workshop, they got to take it. It's fantastic. I learned so much about myself, about it takes my art and creativity to another. And I mean, I'm going to bring it back up. It takes it literally to another space.
It does. and I love the mandala workshops. They're always well attended, and many of them have sold out. I mean, we've had 60 people in there for a New Year's mandala workshop, and I've done them on multiple other themes as well. In therapy, when I do them, if someone, say, got a heart disease, then I'll have them do a mandala called My Heart. Or if they have colon cancer, the mandala will be My Colon. Or if they're in a personal crisis, I will say, I would like you to do a mandala, and the title is I Am. Or it could be a question, who am I?
Wow.
And I've done a Who Am I workshop, mandala workshop, before. I showed you my art from that one over there. We've done 2 of them, actually. But people always have wild experiences. And not only that, one of the most amazing things about a mandala workshop is not only your own experience, but all the things you learn from everybody else's experience, and seeing their art and going, oh my God, I've got that problem in my life too. It's almost like the universe brings exactly the right people into the room to give you the information you need about how to heal, how to grow, or what not to do, or, oh my God, I'm going to make sure I don't ever do that because that really caused this person a lot of pain, and I can see how easy it would be to fall into that trap. I mean, people buzz at these things because it's almost like the universe is speaking to them live, you know?
Yeah. I mean, having that opportunity to be at home and like in the comforts of my own space, it was like I think that's what also added to me being able to really channel this, because I remember you saying this and it was really funny for me. It was just like, don't interrupt other people, and it's like I didn't have to worry about that. I had my tea and I just had my canvas, and I was just like, all right, it's go time. Let's just make this painting as absolute, as excellent as I possibly can make it.
Yeah, well, I think you heard me say don't interrupt other people, but the real reason that I had to say that is because we've had almost every person that's complained to me because they keep getting interrupted was a beautiful woman. And so what happens is all the guys are getting so horny, they keep walking over there and trying to hit on the girls while they're painting their mandalas, and it irritates the shit out of them. So they finally come to me and say, would you please get these flies to stay away from me because I'm trying to paint and everyone keeps hitting on me. So it was really about stay in your own space, be together, but be respectful. It's kind of like being in a library. You shouldn't be dancing on the tables singing rap music in a library, or you don't really realize what a library is for. But no, I love, who got me started on mandalas was the most powerful shaman I've ever worked with in my life, Rowena Kreider. And she was a great mentor and guide to me and taught me a lot and helped me as a consultant, sort of a as needed guide and coach. And oh man, I have to show you some of her books. I mean, she's just wickedly powerful. And she blew me wide open with a mandala requirement. I went and took a 7-day workshop on the 9 Egyptian light bodies at her home that she built by hand, which is a working piece of art. She built this entire thing in her 70s by hand.
Wow.
And every part of it was art.
Wow.
I mean, from the foundation to the doorknobs to the ceiling to the paint you walked into like an Alex Gray experience, and she did it herself.
Wow. That sounds incredible.
And she was a musician, a philosopher, a scientist, a mathematician, an expert at the ancient mysteries, a highly qualified shaman, an expert in language. I mean, this woman had like 7 master's degrees or PhDs. It was just freaking crazy.
Wow.
And she could look at you and tell you everything about you with scary accuracy.
Wow.
And so she was really the one that blew me open and got me started in this. And when I realized how powerful it was, I started studying art therapy, and I studied Jungian art therapy, and because Carl Jung pioneered art therapy, he's really one of the chief pioneers of art therapy. So I studied all Jung's work on it. I studied many, many other systems, and I did what I always do. I synthesized them into my own system. So I took what I thought was the most important pieces, amalgamated them into a whole. But my point is, it was a shaman that got me started on that. And she didn't need to use psychedelics, this one. she could, one of my most amazing experiences we had in class with her, she had us sit in a circle, and she focused on each of us one at a time and tapped into our soul, and she channeled us through the piano. And you should have seen the emotional reactions to people. Like, when she played me, I'm like, fuck. that's me. I knew it was me, and everyone did. And I mean, people would just break down and have an emotional catharsis because it was mind-boggling that there was a human being in the room that could tap into you so deeply. She could play the music of your soul, and it was undeniably you every time.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was almost like she set me up to do what I'm here to do on many levels. I mean, I was already doing it. I already had my institute. I'd written How to Eat, Move, I've done a lot of things, but it's kind of like she planted the seeds in me to help me finish my journey and do what I came here to do. But I was meditating in my sauna one day, and this feeling of sadness came over me, and I'm like, where's that coming from? I'm not sad. So I asked my soul to track where it was coming from, and my soul said, your friend and teacher Rowena is going to leave soon. I said, really? And by that time she was 91. So the next day I called her, and she fortunately answered the phone, and I said, Rowena, it's Paul. She said, oh, how are you? How are you doing? I said, I'm doing good, but I'm worried about you. I said, I was meditating in the sauna, and I got this overwhelming feeling of sadness, and so I tracked it to you, and I said, it feels like you're ready to leave the world. She said, you're very perceptive, honey. I'm done here. I'll be leaving soon. And 3 months later, she died. And so it was an interesting experience for me I was happy that she was free because I could tell she was just tired of being in a body, and the world was just kind of infantile for her. I mean, when you're someone that's that intelligent, everyone around you is like a little kid, you know. And it gets like to be in a daycare center. I've lived through that. My midlife crisis was all about that. But very interesting experience. It was interesting because I felt the sadness of knowing she was leaving, but I also felt reassured that because of my abilities and skills, I can talk to her anytime I want to. And I knew that she would be as safe can get leaving her body. I mean, this woman could you could probably give her 100 grams of mushrooms and she'd just smile at you.
Well, I'm happy she taught you all about mandalas because it allowed me to learn from you and learn from her in so many ways.
Yeah,
So
that was my point. Like you see where that was really what this podcast was about today is I'm taking you and saying, Jonathan's got something to share with you and I can see it. It's my job to say, all right, here's Jonathan. He's channeling a myth for us, and it's got a lot of messages that we need to pay attention to. In fact, you know, I think it was your idea. You said, Paul, would you like to talk about this on a podcast, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it hit me. I'm like, okay, yes, we should do that. You know, I wouldn't have done that for anybody else. I mean,
no, I'm deeply appreciative and super grateful that we did. And also super honored to be here.
I would have done it for Alex Gray or somebody like that. But you know, as you know from being in the class, and there's a lot of beautiful art. I mean, there's stunning art in these classes. I mean, people blow my mind. I've had people like my buddy Mike Salemi, who was in therapy with me, and I coached him for 2.5 years. So after 2.5 years, I thought he was ready for a shamanic journey. So I gave him an art assignment, and it was the first time he'd ever painted. And you should see what this guy painted. He painted this wolf. I can't remember. I think it had a moon behind it or something, but it was like a wolf howling in the night. And it was like it was alive. I'm like, how in the frickin' hell did you paint that? It's your first painting. I don't know. It just came out of me. And man, so you know, as a teacher and a teacher of art therapy, I get regularly blown away. I mean, I see people come in and they kind of paint like I do, and then a year later they're painting like you do, and I'm like, my job was to just unlock that in you. That was the reason we had a soul contract. Now you need to go use it.
Amazing.
And you know, the painting in your guest room where you're staying,
mm-hmm.
You see
the one above the bed, or
the one above the dresser that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Kyle Kingsbury's wife painted that for me.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
That picture of me
Yeah.
was the first human body she'd ever painted.
This is the one with the wolf and
Yes.
yeah.
Those
Okay.
are many of my power animals. And so she channeled me into that painting, but that's the first human body she'd ever painted in her life. I'm like, Natasha, you painted me better than anyone who has ever painted me. And I'm like, this is an example of what I mean. You get these people that just, they're sitting on massive amounts of talent.
Cool.
So thank you for sharing with all of us today, Jonathan. I'm
Absolutely.
really
Thank you.
grateful for you and for your life path and your commitment to excellence. And thank you all for joining us. And I hope Jonathan's inspired you as much as he's inspired me and many others. And what a great offering to have Jonathan be a coach for you. Jesus, top of the line, baby. And make sure you're not a pain in the ass if you hire him, because I know what it's like to have pain in the ass clients. Be respectful and listen. And buy one of these prints for $275. You can have a wickedly good piece of art that'll open you up and probably be a map for what's coming too, I suspect. And thanks to my sponsors for all your great products, all your love and your sustainable practices and all that you do for each other and for us and for the world and for your families and for our families. Thanks to any of you that buy anything from the sponsors that helps support the podcast so I can spend the time and the energy needed to track down the Jonathan Nagels of the world, which there's only one, but I found him, and or he found me. And thank you all for working with us to make the world a better place each day. We can't wait for someone else to do it. It's our turn. Let's do it. Lots of love. Can't wait to see you next time. Enjoy your painting from Jonathan and enjoy living and loving fully. Aho, Great Spirit. It is done. It is done. It is done.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, Jonathan Nagel. You can find Jonathan on Instagram at Jonathan Nagel, on YouTube at Jonathan's Nagel, or on Facebook at jonathan.nagel. Jonathan is offering Paul's listeners 10% off the purchase of a limited edition, high-quality print of his 2023 mandala painting, Lightbringer, Birth of Consciousness. To get your copy, visit his website at bit.ly/lightbringerart. That's bit.ly/lightbringerart. If you'd like coaching to help unblock your creative force, reach out to Jonathan for a free 15-minute call, or you can also book a longer consultation. Visit jonathannageldesign.com/scheduling. Mention that you are a Living 4D listener for special discounts on Jonathan's art and creative coaching packages. Jonathan is also available for specially commissioned artwork. Visit his website, jonathannageldesign.com, to see more examples of his work. You can find Paul on Instagram and TikTok at paul.chek, on Twitter at paulchek, or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/living4D with Paul Chek. You can watch more on Paul's blog at paulcheksblog.com or visit the Chek Institute site at chekinstitute.com to find Paul's e-learning courses, advanced training programs, and to learn more about the Chek Academy. You could read the show notes and find links to the resources mentioned in this episode at chekinstitute.com/podcast. A big thank you to our sponsors, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, and Organifi. Their support is essential in producing this podcast, and we hope you will show your support by visiting them online and trying all the amazing products they produce. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review at the top of the show page on Spotify or at the bottom of the show page if you are listening on Apple Podcast.